Welcome to Poirot Stories, where Agatha Christie's Hercule Poirot brings captivating mysteries to life.
In the shadowed halls of Blackthorn Manor, a scream pierces the night, and Sir Reginald Haverford lies dead, stabbed through the heart, a blood-stained ancient manuscript open beside him. Why was the priceless Codex Aureus left open to a page on poisons when a dagger did the deed? Who wrote the cryptic note luring him to his doom? As secrets unravel and alibis crumble, only one man can see through the lies. Hercule Poirot, the master detective whose little gray cells will uncover a truth more shocking than the crime itself. In a world of hidden affairs, buried debts, and a mysterious order of the saffron veil, every clue counts and every suspect hides a secret. Will you unravel the mystery before Poirot reveals the killer in a twist that will leave you breathless? Chapter 1. The Gathering at Blackthorn Manor. The late summer sun hung low over the rolling hills of Devon, casting a golden haze across the manicured lawns of Blackthorn Manor. The estate, an imposing Georgian structure with ivy-clad walls and tall, mullioned windows, stood as a testament to both wealth and secrets. Its owner, Sir Reginald Haverford, a retired diplomat with a penchant for lavish gatherings, had invited a select group of guests for a weekend of intellectual discourse and fine dining. The air was thick with the scent of roses and the promise of intrigue, though none present could have foreseen the shadow about to descend. Captain Arthur Hastings, ever the loyal companion of Hercule Poirot, stepped out of the chauffeured car and adjusted his tie, squinting against the sunlight. He had been surprised by the invitation, for he and Sir Reginald had only a passing acquaintance through London's social circles. Yet the prospect of a weekend in the country, coupled with Poirot's insistence that something curious was afoot, had drawn him here. Poirot himself had declined to attend immediately, citing a prior engagement, but had promised to join Hastings if matters took an interesting turn. Hastings, accustomed to his friend's cryptic ways, had packed his bags with a mix of curiosity and trepidation. Inside the manor, the guests were assembling in the grand drawing room, a chamber adorned with mahogany paneling, crystal chandeliers, and portraits of stern-faced Haverfords long past. Sir Reginald, a portly man with silver hair and a booming voice, held court near the fireplace, his eyes gleaming with the satisfaction of a host in his element. His wife, Lady Eleanor Haverford, moved among the guests with the grace of a seasoned hostess, her silk gown whispering against the polished floor. She was younger than her husband by some 20 years, her beauty tempered by a certain hardness in her gaze, as though she carried a weight unspoken. The guest list was a curious mix, as Hastings soon observed. There was Dr. Lionel Cresswell, a neuropsychologist of some renown, whose sharp wit and piercing eyes suggested a man who saw more than he said. Beside him stood his wife, Margaret Cresswell, a quiet woman with a nervous habit of twisting her pearl necklace. Then there was Victor Langston, a brash financier whose fortune was rumored to be as precarious as his temper, accompanied by his fiancée Clara Beaumont, an actress whose radiant smile masked a calculating mind. The group was rounded out by Miss Penelope Ward, Sir Reginald's niece, a pale, bookish young woman with an air of quiet defiance, and Father Thomas Brennan, a local vicar whose gentle demeanor belied a keen interest in human nature. As drinks were served and conversation flowed, Hastings noted the undercurrents of tension. Sir Reginald spoke at length about his latest passion. A rare manuscript, the Codex Aureus, a medieval text he had acquired at great expense. A priceless artifact, he declared, gesturing toward a locked glass case in the corner of the room. Its secrets are said to unlock the mysteries of the human soul. His words drew polite murmurs, but Hastings caught Clara Beaumont's fleeting glance at Victor Langston, a look that spoke of more than casual interest. Dinner was announced at precisely 7 o'clock, and the guests proceeded to the dining room, a cavernous space lit by candelabras. The meal was exquisite. Roast pheasant, buttered asparagus, and a claret that Sir Reginald boasted was from a vintage Napoleon himself might have savored. Yet the atmosphere was strained. Victor Langston's loud laughter grated against Dr. Cresswell's measured responses, while Lady Eleanor's attempts at levity seemed forced. Penelope Ward, seated beside Hastings, spoke little, her eyes darting to the head of the table where her uncle presided. It was during the dessert course, as the butler poured coffee, that the first hint of discord surfaced. Sir Reginald, his face flushed from wine, raised his glass in a toast. "To secrets," he said, his voice carrying a peculiar edge. "May they remain buried or else bring us truth." The words hung in the air, met with uneasy smiles. Margaret Cresswell's hand trembled as she reached for her cup, and Father Brennan's brow furrowed as though sensing a storm. After dinner, the guests retired to the drawing-room once more, where a fire crackled against the evening chill. Sir Reginald, ever the showman, unlocked the glass case to display the Codex Aureus. The manuscript, bound in worn leather and adorned with gold leaf, was a thing of beauty, its pages filled with intricate script and illuminated figures. "A treasure worth killing for," Victor Langston remarked, his tone half joking, though his eyes lingered on the book. Hastings, observing the group, felt a prickle of unease. He had seen such gatherings before, polished surfaces hiding jagged motives. As the clock struck 10, Sir Reginald excused himself to his study, claiming a need to review some correspondence. Lady Eleanor suggested a game of bridge, but the mood was restless, and the guests soon dispersed to their rooms or the library. Hastings, unable to shake his disquiet, lingered by the fire, replaying the evening's exchanges in his mind. It was nearing midnight when the scream pierced the silence. It came from the direction of Sir Reginald's study, a sharp, anguished cry that sent Hastings bolting from his chair. He was joined by Dr. Cresswell and Clara Beaumont, who had been in the library, and together they hurried down the corridor. The study door was ajar, and inside, sprawled across the Persian rug, lay Sir Reginald Haverford. His face was contorted in a rictus of pain, his eyes staring blankly at the ceiling. A small silver-handled dagger protruded from his chest, and beside him the Codex Aureus lay open, its pages stained with blood. Lady Eleanor, who had followed the commotion, let out a choked sob and sank to her knees. Dr. Cresswell knelt beside the body, his fingers probing for a pulse, but his grim expression confirmed what was already clear. Sir Reginald was dead. The room filled with the other guests, their faces a mix of shock and suspicion. Victor Langston muttered something about calling the police, while Penelope Ward stood frozen, her hands clasped tightly together. Hastings, his heart pounding, stepped back to survey the scene. The study was a small, oak-paneled room with a single window locked from the inside. A desk, cluttered with papers, stood against one wall, and a bookshelf loomed opposite. The dagger, an ornamental piece from Sir Reginald's collection, was an unlikely but effective weapon. The Codex Aureus, its pages now marred, seemed to mock the tragedy before it. As the guests whispered among themselves, Hastings' thoughts turned to Poirot. He had seen his friend unravel such mysteries before, piecing together fragments of human behavior with surgical precision. He retrieved his notebook and began jotting down details. The time, 11:52 p.m. The position of the body, the locked window, the bloodied manuscript. He noted, too, the alibis, or lack thereof, for each guest. Lady Eleanor had been in her room, she claimed, preparing for bed. Dr. Cresswell and Clara had been in the library discussing a play. Victor Langston had stepped outside for a cigar alone. Margaret Cresswell said she had been writing letters in her room. Penelope Ward had been reading in the conservatory, and Father Brennan had been in the chapel praying. The local constable, a stout man named Inspector Gibbs, arrived within the hour, his manner brisk but overwhelmed. He surveyed the scene, took statements, and declared the death a murder, though he seemed at a loss for where to begin. "A bad business," he muttered, eyeing the guests with suspicion. "No one leaves the manor until we sort this out." Hastings, standing by the study door, felt a familiar resolve. He telephoned Poirot at once, relaying the grim events. "Mon ami," came Poirot's voice, crisp and calm despite the hour. "You have stumbled into a most intriguing puzzle. I shall arrive by the morning train. Observe, Hastings, but do not judge. The little gray cells, they will do the rest." As the line went silent, Hastings returned to the study where the guests had gathered once more. The air was thick with unspoken accusations, and every glance seemed to carry a hidden meaning. Blackthorn Manor, so elegant and serene mere hours ago, had become a stage for murder. And Hercule Poirot, Hastings knew, would soon take center stage. Chapter 2. The Shadow of the Crime. The clock in Blackthorn Manor's grand hall struck 2 in the morning, its chimes echoing through the silent corridors like a mournful knell. The guests, shaken by the discovery of Sir Reginald Haverford's body, had been shepherded into the drawing-room by Inspector Gibbs, who was now pacing before the fireplace, his notebook clutched tightly. The air was heavy with the scent of wax from the guttering candles and the sharper tang of fear. Captain Arthur Hastings sat near the window, his eyes scanning the assembled group, each face a mask of grief, suspicion, or guarded calculation. Inspector Gibbs, a man of methodical habit but limited imagination, had taken charge with a bluster that did little to conceal his unease. "No one is to leave this room until I've had a proper statement from each of you," he declared, his voice carrying the weight of authority but lacking conviction. "Sir Reginald was murdered, and the killer is likely among us. I'll have the truth, mark my words." Lady Eleanor Haverford sat on a velvet chaise, her hands clasped tightly in her lap, her face pale but composed. Her eyes, however, betrayed a flicker of something, grief perhaps, or something colder. Beside her, Margaret Cresswell twisted her pearl necklace until the strand threatened to snap, her lips moving silently as if in prayer. Dr. Lionel Cresswell, her husband, stood by the mantel, his arms crossed, his sharp gaze flitting from face to face. Victor Langston, the financier, slumped in an armchair, his earlier bravado replaced by a sullen scowl, while Clara Beaumont, his fiancée, perched on the armrest, her expression unreadable. Penelope Ward, Sir Reginald's niece, sat alone in a corner, a book open on her lap but unread, her fingers tracing the edges of the pages. Father Thomas Brennan, the vicar, murmured softly to himself, his hands folded as if in benediction. Hastings, ever observant, noted the small details that seemed to hum with significance. The way Lady Eleanor's fingers tightened when Gibbs mentioned the dagger. The faint tremor in Victor Langston's hand as he lit a cigarette. The way Penelope's eyes lingered on the glass case that had held the Codex Aureus. He jotted these observations in his notebook, knowing Poirot would demand precision when he arrived. The murder scene itself was a puzzle that gnawed at Hastings' mind. Sir Reginald had been found in his study at 11:52 p.m. The silver-handled dagger plunged into his chest. The Codex Aureus, the prized manuscript, lay open beside him, its pages stained with blood. The study's window was locked and the door had been ajar, suggesting the killer had fled moments before the scream. Uttered, it was later determined, by Lady Eleanor, who claimed to have discovered the body while passing by. The room showed no signs of a struggle. The desk was orderly save for a single overturned ink bottle, and the bookshelf stood untouched. Yet the codex itself seemed out of place, its pages turned to a section on medieval poisons, a detail that struck Hastings as both curious and ominous. Inspector Gibbs began his interrogations with Lady Eleanor, who recounted her movements in a voice steady but strained. "I retired to my room after dinner," she said, her hands smoothing her silk gown. "I was preparing for bed when I remembered a letter I needed to post. I passed the study on my way to the hall and saw the door ajar. I called out to Reginald, but there was no answer. Then I saw him, and I screamed." Her eyes filled with tears, but Hastings noted they did not fall. Dr. Cresswell was next, his account clipped and precise. "Clara and I were in the library discussing her latest play. We heard the scream and ran to the study. I examined Sir Reginald, but he was already dead. The dagger was one of his own from the collection on the wall." He gestured toward the study, his tone clinical, though his wife's nervous glance at him suggested unease. Clara Beaumont corroborated his story, her voice soft but clear. "We were talking about Hedda Gabler. Ibsen's work fascinates me. We didn't hear anything until Lady Eleanor's scream." Her composure was flawless, but Hastings caught a fleeting glance she cast at Victor Langston, who was staring into his cigarette smoke as if it held answers. Victor's account was less polished. "I was outside smoking by the terrace. Didn't hear a thing until the commotion started. Whoever did this, it wasn't me. I had no reason to want the old man dead." His defiance rang hollow and Gibbs's eyes narrowed. Margaret Cresswell claimed she had been writing letters in her room, a task she said kept her occupied until the scream drew her downstairs. Her voice trembled and she avoided her husband's gaze. Penelope Ward, questioned next, spoke softly. "I was in the conservatory reading. I didn't hear anything until the scream. Uncle Reginald, he was kind to me, but he had enemies. That manuscript obsessed him." Her words carried a weight that made Hastings pause. Father Brennan, the last to be questioned, offered a serene account. "I was in the chapel praying for the souls of this house. I heard the scream and came at once. Violence is a sin, Inspector, but it is born of human weakness. We must seek the truth with compassion." His words were gentle, but his eyes lingered on the group as if searching for a crack in their facades. Gibbs, scribbling furiously, seemed frustrated by the lack of contradictions. All of you have alibis, but someone's lying, he muttered. The study was locked from the inside, save for that door. No one could have gotten in or out without being seen. And that manuscript. Why was it open? What's it got to do with this? Hastings, listening intently, felt a familiar stir of excitement. These were the threads Poirot would weave into a tapestry of truth. He stepped outside to the terrace where the cool night air cleared his mind. The manor's grounds were silent save for the rustle of leaves in the breeze. He recalled Sir Reginald's toast at dinner. To secrets, may they remain buried, or else bring us truth. Had the man known something was amiss? Had he invited his own killer to dine? As dawn broke, casting a pale light over the estate, a car crunched up the gravel drive. Hercule Poirot stepped out, his small, neat figure immaculate in a tailored suit, his mustache perfectly waxed despite the early hour. His eyes, bright and piercing, took in the manor with a single glance. "Mon ami," he greeted Hastings, his voice warm but tinged with urgency. "You have called me to a most intriguing affair. A murder, a locked room, a priceless manuscript. Oh, it is a puzzle worthy of Hercule Poirot." Hastings recounted the night's events, detailing the body, the dagger, the Codex Aureus, and the guests' alibis. Poirot listened, his head tilted, his fingers steepled. "The little gray cells, they are already at work," he said. "This codex, it is not merely a prop, Hastings. It is a clue, perhaps the clue, and the alibis, too perfect, too tidy. We shall see what lies beneath." Poirot entered the drawing room where the guests, exhausted but sleepless, greeted him with a mix of curiosity and apprehension. Inspector Gibbs, clearly out of his depth, welcomed the detective's presence. "Monsieur Poirot, your reputation precedes you. I trust you'll make sense of this mess." Poirot bowed slightly, his eyes scanning the room. "Mess, Inspector? No, it is order disguised as chaos. Every detail, every word, every glance, it tells a story. And Hercule Poirot, he shall read it." He turned to the group, his voice calm but commanding. "Mesdames et messieurs, a crime has been committed and the truth lies among you. I ask only that you speak and I shall listen. The little gray cells, they never fail." As Poirot began his inquiries, Hastings watched in awe. The detective's questions were deceptively simple, his manner polite yet probing. He asked Lady Eleanor about her husband's recent mood, noting her hesitation when she mentioned his obsession with the Codex. He questioned Dr. Cresswell about the dagger's precise placement, observing the man's clinical detachment. Clara Beaumont's charm faltered under Poirot's scrutiny, and Victor Langston's bluster seemed to shrink. Penelope Ward's quiet answers revealed a deep knowledge of her uncle's affairs, while Father Brennan's serene responses carried an undercurrent of caution. By the time Poirot paused, the sun was fully risen, and the room buzzed with tension. "We have only begun," he said, his eyes gleaming. "But already the threads of truth emerge. Hastings, we shall examine the study now. The scene of the crime, it speaks when one listens." As they moved toward the study, Hastings felt the weight of the mystery deepen. Someone in that room had plunged a dagger into Sir Reginald's heart. Someone had opened the Codex Aureus to a page of poisons. And someone, he was certain, was watching Poirot's every move, waiting for the little Belgian to unravel their carefully laid plans. Chapter 3. The Arrival of Poirot. The morning light filtered through the tall windows of Blackthorn Manor, casting long shadows across the oak-paneled corridors as Hercule Poirot, with Captain Arthur Hastings at his side, made his way to Sir Reginald Haverford's study. The air was thick with the residue of tragedy, and the manor, once vibrant with the hum of polite society, now seemed to hold its breath. Poirot's small, precise steps echoed with purpose, his eyes bright with the intensity of a man whose mind was already piecing together the fragments of a puzzle only he could see. Hastings, still reeling from the events of the previous night, felt a surge of relief at Poirot's presence. The little Belgian detective, with his immaculate suit, perfectly waxed mustache, and air of quiet confidence, was a beacon of order in the chaos of murder. "Mon ami," Poirot had said upon stepping from the car, "you have stumbled into a drama most complex, but fear not. Hercule Poirot is here, and the truth it shall not elude me." The study, sealed off by Inspector Gibbs's orders, was a shrine to the crime. The door, now guarded by a young constable, creaked as Poirot pushed it open, revealing the grim scene within. Sir Reginald's body had been removed to the local morgue, but the blood-stained rug and the Codex Aureus, still open on the floor, remained untouched. The silver-handled dagger, now in Gibbs's possession, had left its mark in the form of a dark stain on the carpet. The room itself was small but richly appointed. A mahogany desk, a bookshelf lined with leather-bound volumes, a single locked window, and a fireplace where embers had long since died. Poirot stood in the center of the room, his hands clasped behind his back, his head tilted as if listening to the whispers of the walls. "Observe, Hastings," he said softly, "the stage of the crime. It is a theater, and every prop tells a story. The locked window, the open book, the overturned ink bottle, these are not accidents. They are deliberate, like the brushstrokes of an artist." Hastings followed Poirot's gaze, noting the details he had overlooked in the chaos of the night. The desk, though cluttered, showed no signs of a struggle. The papers were neatly stacked, save for the ink bottle, which had spilled a small pool of black across a letter addressed to Sir Reginald's solicitor. The Codex Aureus, its pages open to a passage on medieval poisons, seemed almost too perfectly placed, as if meant to draw attention. Poirot knelt beside it, his gloved fingers hovering over the blood-stained vellum. "This book," he murmured, "it is more than a relic. It is a message. But to whom? And why?" Inspector Gibbs, who had joined them, shifted impatiently. "It's a clear case, Monsieur Poirot," he said, his voice gruff. "Someone got in, stabbed Sir Reginald, and slipped out before Lady Eleanor screamed. The door was ajar, after all. My money's on that Langston fellow, hot-headed, and I hear he owed Sir Reginald money." Poirot's lips twitched in a faint smile. "The obvious, Inspector, is rarely the truth. Monsieur Langston may have motive, but motive alone does not make a murderer. We must consider the how, the why, and the when. The door, you say, was ajar, but why leave it so? And the window locked from within? How curious, no? Let us examine." He moved to the window, his fingers tracing the latch. It was secure, the frame undisturbed, with no signs of tampering. "No one entered or exited here," he said almost to himself. "The killer, then, was already inside or never left." His eyes flicked to the bookshelf, where a small gap caught his attention. He reached up, retrieving a single volume, a treatise on medieval manuscripts, whose spine was slightly misaligned. Inside, a folded piece of paper fluttered to the floor. Poirot unfolded it, revealing a handwritten note. "Meet me at 11:30. The truth must be told." It was unsigned, but the handwriting was elegant, precise. Hastings, peering over Poirot's shoulder, felt a jolt of excitement. "A clue, Poirot! Someone lured Sir Reginald to his death." "Perhaps, Hastings," Poirot replied, his tone measured. "But a clue is only as good as the mind that interprets it. This note, it raises questions. Who wrote it? Was it sent or received, and why leave it here, where it might be found?" He tucked the note into his pocket, his expression unreadable. Leaving the study, Poirot requested a tour of the manor, insisting on seeing the rooms of each guest. Inspector Gibbs, though skeptical, complied, and the group moved through the house, the constable trailing behind. Lady Eleanor's room was a study in elegance, with silk drapes and a vanity cluttered with perfumes. Poirot lingered by the writing desk, noting a half-finished letter in her hand, its ink matching the bottle in the study. "Madame," he said, turning to her, "you wrote last night, oui?" "Before the tragedy?" Lady Eleanor nodded, her composure faltering. "A letter to my sister," she said. "I never finished it." Poirot's eyes gleamed, but he said nothing, moving on to the Cresswell's room. Dr. Cresswell and his wife shared a suite, its austerity at odds with the manor's opulence. A medical bag sat on the dresser, its contents neatly arranged, and Poirot's gaze lingered on a small vial of sedative. "For my wife's nerves," Dr. Cresswell said quickly. "She has trouble sleeping." Margaret Cresswell, standing by the window, twisted her necklace and said nothing. Clara Beaumont's room was a whirlwind of theatricality. Costumes draped over chairs, a script open on the bed. Poirot picked up the script, noting it was Hedda Gabler, as she had claimed. "A fascinating play, mademoiselle," he said. "A woman trapped by her own ambitions. You relate to her, perhaps?" Clara's smile was tight. "Only as an actress, Monsieur Poirot." Victor Langston's room reeked of cigar smoke, a half-empty bottle of brandy on the nightstand. Poirot examined a crumpled receipt from a London jeweler dated 2 days prior. "An expensive purchase, Monsieur Langston," he remarked. Victor shrugged. "A gift for Clara. What's that got to do with anything?" Penelope Ward's room was sparse, filled with books and a single photograph of her with Sir Reginald taken years earlier. Poirot studied the photograph, noting the warmth in her uncle's smile. "He was fond of you, mademoiselle," he said softly. Penelope's eyes filled with tears. "He was my only family," she whispered. Father Brennan's room, adjacent to the chapel, was austere, with a small prayer book open on the desk. Poirot flipped through it, pausing at a marked passage. "The truth shall set you free." He nodded, as if confirming a private thought, and moved on. Back in the drawing room, Poirot gathered the guests, his presence commanding silence. "Mesdames et messieurs," he began, "a crime has been committed, and the truth lies not in what is said, but in what is not. You have all spoken, but your words, they conceal as much as they reveal. I ask you to reflect. What did you see, what did you hear in the moments before the scream?" The room was silent, save for the crackle of the fire. Lady Eleanor's hands tightened in her lap. Dr. Cresswell's jaw clenched. Clara Beaumont's eyes darted to Victor, who stared at the floor. Penelope Ward's lips parted as if to speak, but she remained silent. Father Brennan's fingers traced the cross at his neck. Poirot's gaze swept over them, his voice soft but piercing. "The little gray cells, they work tirelessly. A note, a book, a locked window, these are pieces of a mosaic. And Hercule Poirot, he shall assemble them, He turned to Hastings, his eyes gleaming. "We have much to do, mon ami. The killer, they are clever, but not clever enough." As the guests dispersed, Hastings followed Poirot to the terrace where the detective lit a cigarette, a rare indulgence, and stared out at the manicured lawns. "What do you make of it, Poirot?" Hastings asked. "That note, the codex, are they the key?" Poirot exhaled a thin stream of smoke. "The key, Hastings, is not one thing but many. The note suggests a meeting, but with whom? The codex open to poisons, why? And the alibis so tidy yet so fragile. We must probe deeper into the hearts of those who hide their truths." The morning wore on, and Poirot's inquiries continued, each question a scalpel cutting through layers of deception. Hastings, watching his friend work, felt the familiar thrill of the chase. The murderer was among them, hidden in plain sight, and Poirot's little gray cells were closing in. Chapter 4. The questions begin. The mid-morning sun bathed Blackthorn Manor in a deceptive calm, its golden rays filtering through the drawing-room's tall windows, where Hercule Poirot stood before the assembled guests. The air was thick with tension, each face a study in guarded emotion, as if the very walls of the manor held their secrets close. Captain Arthur Hastings, seated near the fireplace, watched his friend with a mix of awe and anticipation. Poirot's method, so precise and deliberate, was like a watchmaker's craft, each question a turn of the gear inching toward the truth. Poirot, his small frame erect and his mustache impeccably groomed, clasped his hands behind his back, his eyes scanning the room with the intensity of a hawk. "Mesdames et messieurs," he began, his voice soft yet commanding. "A crime has been committed, and the truth, it hides among you. Hercule Poirot does not rely on chance or conjecture. The little gray cells, they observe, they analyze, they deduce, and so we begin with questions, simple questions, but they will reveal much." Inspector Gibbs, standing by the door, shifted uncomfortably, his notebook open but his confidence waning. He had spent the morning taking statements, but the alibis, so neatly aligned, offered no clear suspect. The locked window, the ajar door, the bloodied Codex Aureus, all pointed to a crime both calculated and confounding. Poirot, however, seemed undaunted, his gaze moving from one guest to another, as if reading the invisible threads of their thoughts. He began with Lady Eleanor Haverford, whose composure was a fragile veneer. "Madame," Poirot said, his tone gentle but probing, "your husband, he was a man of secrets, oui? This Codex Aureus, it consumed him. Tell me, what did he say of it in the days before his death?" Lady Eleanor's hands tightened on her handkerchief, her eyes flickering with something unreadable. "Reginald was obsessed," she admitted. "He spoke of the Codex as a key to hidden knowledge, something about its annotations revealing truths about human nature. He spent hours in his study poring over it. I thought it harmless, a scholar's passion." Her voice wavered, and Hastings noted the slight tremor in her fingers. Poirot nodded, his expression unreadable. "And last night, madam, you passed the study at precisely what time?" 11:45, perhaps a minute or two later," she replied. "I was on my way to post a letter. I saw the door ajar, called out, and then—" Her voice broke and she looked away. Poirot's eyes lingered on her as if weighing her words against an unseen scale. Next, he turned to Dr. Lionel Cresswell, whose clinical demeanor seemed at odds with the tragedy. Monsieur le Docteur, Poirot said, you examined the body. The dagger, it was plunged with precision, oui? Tell me, what did you observe of the wound? Dr. Cresswell's jaw tightened, but his voice was steady. The dagger entered the heart, a single thrust, clean and deep. Death would have been instantaneous. The angle suggests the killer was standing close, facing Sir Reginald. He paused as if choosing his words. It was no accident, Monsieur Poirot. The killer knew what they were doing. Poirot's lips twitched in a faint smile. And you, monsieur, were in the library with Mademoiselle Beaumont. What time did you arrive there? After dinner, around 9, Cresswell said. We stayed until the scream. Clara was discussing her latest role. His wife, Margaret, seated beside him, twisted her necklace, her eyes fixed on the floor. Clara Beaumont, questioned next, met Poirot's gaze with a performer's poise. Monsieur Poirot, she said, her voice smooth. Dr. Cresswell and I were indeed in the library. We spoke of Hedda Gabler, its themes of power and deception. I find such roles illuminating. Her smile was radiant, but Hastings caught a fleeting glance she cast at Victor Langston, who sat brooding in an armchair. And you heard nothing unusual? Poirot pressed. No footsteps, no voices before the scream? Nothing, Clara said firmly. The library is at the far end of the corridor. We were absorbed in conversation. Victor Langston, slouched and sullen, was less composed. Monsieur Langston, Poirot said, his tone sharpening. You were outside smoking, you say. Alone at 11:30 when Sir Reginald met his end. A curious choice to stand in the cold when the house is so warm. Langston's scowl deepened. I needed air, he muttered. I was on the terrace near the rose garden, didn't see or hear anything until the scream. And no, I didn't owe Sir Reginald money, if that's what you're getting at. We had business, sure, but it was settled. Poirot's eyes gleamed. Business, monsieur? Of what nature? Langston hesitated, his fingers drumming on the armrest. Investments. He wanted in on a venture I'm backing. Nothing shady, just business. His defiance rang hollow, and Poirot made a mental note, though his face betrayed nothing. Penelope Ward, Sir Reginald's niece, was next, her pale face framed by dark curls. Mademoiselle, Poirot said softly, your uncle, he was kind to you, oui. Yet you spoke of his enemies. Who were they? Penelope's hands clasped her book tightly. Uncle Reginald could be difficult, she said. He was generous, but he held grudges. He argued with Victor about money, with Dr. Cresswell about some academic theory, even with Aunt Eleanor about the estate and the codex. He said it was worth more than all of us combined. Her voice was steady, but her eyes darted to the glass case where the manuscript had been displayed. Poirot nodded, his gaze lingering on her. And you were in the conservatory reading. What book, if I may ask? The Moonstone, she replied. Wilkie Collins. I find mysteries comforting. Her lips twitched in a faint smile, but it faded quickly. Father Thomas Brennan, the last to be questioned, spoke with serene calm. Monsieur Poirot, he said, I was in the chapel praying. I heard nothing until Lady Eleanor's scream. This house, it carries a weight of sin. I sensed it even before this tragedy. Poirot's eyes narrowed. Sin, mon père, a strong word. Did Sir Reginald confess anything to you, perhaps? Father Brennan's fingers traced his cross. He spoke of burdens, of truths he wished to unburden. But he was not a man to reveal all, even in confession. His words were measured, but Poirot's gaze lingered, as if sensing an unspoken truth. The interviews concluded, Poirot stepped back, his hands clasped. "Merci, mes amis," he said. "You have given me much to consider, but the truth, it is like a shadow. It moves when you approach. I shall find it, rest assured." As the guests dispersed, Poirot led Hastings to the study once more, his steps brisk. "What do you make of it, Poirot?" Hastings asked, his notebook filled with scribbled observations. "They all have alibis, but they're so convenient." "Convenient, oui," Poirot said, his eyes gleaming. "Too convenient. The alibis, they are like a symphony, each note in place, yet the melody is false. The note we found, the codex open to poisons, the locked window, these are not accidents. They are deliberate, Hastings, a performance for our benefit." He knelt by the rug, examining the bloodstain. "The dagger," he murmured. "It was taken from the wall, yet no fingerprints were found, according to Inspector Gibbs. A careful killer, then. And the codex, why leave it open to that page? A message, perhaps, or a distraction?" Hastings frowned. "A distraction from what?" Poirot smiled faintly. "That, mon ami, is what we shall discover. Come, let us walk the grounds. The terrace where Monsieur Langston smoked, it may tell us more." They stepped onto the terrace, where the rose garden bloomed in defiance of the tragedy. Poirot examined the gravel path, his eyes narrowing at a faint imprint, a cigarette butt half buried in the dirt. "Langston's, perhaps," he said, retrieving it with a handkerchief. "But why here, so far from the terrace? And look, the gravel is disturbed as if someone moved quickly." Hastings' pulse quickened. "You think Langston lied about where he was?" "I think, Hastings, that everyone lies in their own way," Poirot replied. "But the lies, they betray the truth. We shall see." As they returned to the manor, the weight of the mystery settled over Hastings. The killer was among them, their motives hidden in a web of alibis and secrets. But Poirot, with his little gray cells, was already unraveling the threads, and Hastings knew the truth was closer than it seemed. Chapter 5. The Red Herrings. The afternoon sun cast dappled shadows across Blackthorn Manor's lawns, but within the walls the atmosphere was heavy with suspicion. Hercule Poirot, his small frame radiating quiet authority, had spent the morning probing the guests' alibis, each answer weaving a tapestry of half-truths that only deepened the mystery of Sir Reginald Haverford's murder. Captain Arthur Hastings, ever at his friend's side, felt the familiar stir of anticipation as Poirot's methodical mind began to separate fact from fiction. The little Belgian detective, with his immaculate suit and gleaming eyes, was in his element, and Hastings knew the case was about to take a turn. Inspector Gibbs, frustrated by the lack of progress, had seized upon Victor Langston as the prime suspect. The financier's brusque manner, combined with rumors of a financial dispute with Sir Reginald, made him an easy target. "It's obvious," Gibbs declared, pacing the drawing room where the guests were once again gathered. "Langston was outside alone at the time of the murder. He had motive, money troubles, and opportunity. That cigarette butt Poirot found on the terrace proves he wasn't where he said he was." Poirot, standing by the fireplace, raised a hand, his voice calm but firm. "Inspector, the obvious is a dangerous trap. It is like a mirage in the desert. It promises clarity but leads to ruin. Monsieur Langston may have secrets, but a murderer? We shall see. The little gray cells, they do not leap to conclusions. Hastings watched as the guests reacted to Gibbs's accusation. Victor Langston's face reddened, his fists clenching. "This is nonsense," he barked. "I told you I was smoking on the terrace. I didn't owe Sir Reginald a penny. Our business was settled. You've got no proof." Beside him, Clara Beaumont placed a restraining hand on his arm, her expression serene but her eyes sharp. Lady Eleanor Haverford, seated on a chaise, looked away, her fingers twisting her handkerchief. Dr. Lionel Cresswell's lips tightened while his wife Margaret seemed to shrink into her chair. Penelope Ward, Sir Reginald's niece, stared at her hands, and Father Thomas Brennan murmured a quiet prayer. Poirot's gaze swept over them, his silence more piercing than any question. "Let us consider," he said at last, "the facts. Sir Reginald was stabbed at approximately 11:30 in a locked study with the Codex Aureus open beside him to a page on poisons. A note found in a book suggests a meeting at that hour, yet all of you claim to have been elsewhere. Monsieur Langston, you were on the terrace, Tell me, what did you see?" Langston shifted, his bravado faltering. "Nothing out of the ordinary. The gardens, the stars. It was dark. I heard the scream and came running." His voice was gruff, but Hastings noted a flicker of unease in his eyes. Poirot nodded, turning to Clara Beaumont. "And you, mademoiselle, in the library with Dr. Cresswell. You discussed Hedda Gabler, a play of deception and power. Did you perhaps notice the time?" Clara's smile was measured. "I wasn't watching the clock, Monsieur Poirot. But it was well after 11 when we heard Lady Eleanor's scream. Dr. Cresswell can confirm it." Cresswell nodded, his expression impassive, though Margaret's nervous glance suggested otherwise. Poirot's questions continued, each one a delicate probe into the guests' stories. Lady Eleanor reiterated her account of passing the study to post a letter, her voice steady but her eyes avoiding Poirot's. Penelope Ward spoke of reading the Moonstone in the conservatory, her tone soft but firm. Father Brennan repeated his claim of praying in the chapel, his serenity unshaken. Each alibi, Hastings realized, was plausible yet fragile, like a house of cards waiting for a breeze. The detective then turned his attention to the physical evidence, requesting to see the dagger which Gibbs produced from a locked box. The silver-handled blade, part of Sir Reginald's collection, was ornate but deadly, its edge still stained with blood. Poirot examined it closely, his gloved fingers tracing the handle. "No fingerprints," he murmured. "A careful killer, or one who wore gloves. And yet, the dagger was taken from the wall. A spontaneous act, or planned." Gibbs, growing impatient, interjected, "It's Langston, I tell you. He's got the temper, the motive, and no one to vouch for him. Why waste time on the others?" Poirot's eyes gleamed. "Because, Inspector, the truth is not a race to the finish line. It is a puzzle, and every piece matters. Let us consider another possibility." He turned to the group, his voice soft but commanding. "The Codex Aureus. Why was it open to a page on poisons? Sir Reginald, he was not poisoned, non? The dagger was the weapon. So why this page? A distraction, perhaps, to lead us astray." Hastings felt a chill. The Codex, with its blood-stained pages, had seemed a grim coincidence, but Poirot's words suggested otherwise. "A red herring, Poirot?" he asked quietly. "Précisément, Hastings," Poirot replied. "The killer wishes us to focus on the book, on its value, on its secrets. But the true secret lies elsewhere. in the hearts of those who dined with Sir Reginald last night. The room fell silent, the weight of Poirot's words settling over the guests. Lady Eleanor's handkerchief twisted tighter, and Dr. Cresswell's eyes narrowed. Clara Beaumont's smile faltered, and Victor Langston lit another cigarette, his hands unsteady. Penelope Ward's gaze lingered on the glass case, now empty, while Father Brennan's fingers traced his cross. Poirot, undeterred, continued his inquiries, asking seemingly trivial questions that Hastings knew were anything but. To Lady Eleanor he inquired about the letter she had intended to post, noting her hesitation when she described its contents as personal. To Dr. Cresswell he asked about Sir Reginald's health, eliciting a curt response about the man's robust constitution. To Clara he probed her familiarity with the manor's layout, her answer smooth but vague. Each question, Hastings realized, was a thread pulled from the fabric of their alibis, loosening the weave. The detective then requested a map of the manor which the butler, a stoic man named Jenkins, provided. Poirot studied it intently, tracing the corridors from the study to the terrace, the library, the conservatory, and the chapel. "The timing," he murmured. "It is critical." The scream at 11:52, the alibis all neatly placed. Yet the note suggests a meeting at 11:30. What happened in those 22 minutes? Hastings, peering over Poirot's shoulder, noted the proximity of the terrace to the study's window. Could someone have entered through the window, Poirot? Even if it was locked? Poirot shook his head. "No, Hastings. The window was locked from within, undisturbed. The killer was inside or never left. But the terrace, it intrigues me. Monsieur Langston's cigarette butt was found in the gravel, not on the terrace itself. A small detail, but significant." As the afternoon wore on, Poirot's questions grew more pointed, focusing on the relationships between the guests and Sir Reginald. Lady Eleanor admitted to occasional disagreements over the estate's management, but insisted they were minor. Dr. Cresswell revealed a professional rivalry with Sir Reginald over a manuscript authentication, though he dismissed it as academic. Clara Beaumont claimed only a passing acquaintance, while Victor Langston's financial ties to Sir Reginald grew murkier with each question. Penelope Ward spoke of her uncle's protective nature, but hinted at his controlling side. Father Brennan, cryptic as ever, alluded to Sir Reginald's burdened conscience without elaborating. By the time Poirot paused, the guests were visibly strained, their polite facades cracking under his scrutiny. Gibbs, still convinced of Langston's guilt, pressed for an arrest, but Poirot demurred. "Patience, Inspector," he said. "The red herrings, they swim in schools, but the truth is a solitary fish. We shall catch it, but not yet." As the guests dispersed for a late luncheon, Poirot drew Hastings aside, his eyes alight with purpose. "Mon ami," he said, "the killer has laid a trap, pointing us toward Monsieur Langston. But the little gray cells, they see beyond the obvious. The note, the codex, the alibis, they are pieces of a larger design. We must look closer at the silences between their words." Hastings nodded, his mind racing. The murderer was clever, but Poirot was cleverer. The red herrings might obscure the truth, but not for long. Not with Hercule Poirot on the case. Chapter 6. A Clue in Detail. The late afternoon light filtered through the heavy drapes of Blackthorn Manor, casting a somber glow over the drawing room where Hercule Poirot stood, his small figure commanding the attention of the restless guests. The air was thick with unspoken accusations, and the weight of Sir Reginald Haverford's murder hung over the assembly like a storm cloud. Captain Arthur Hastings, seated near the grand fireplace, watched his friend with a familiar mix of admiration and curiosity. Poirot's methodical approach, so precise and unyielding, was beginning to unravel the tangled web of alibis and motives, and Hastings sensed a breakthrough was near. Poirot, his hands clasped behind his back, surveyed the group with eyes that missed nothing. "Mesdames et messieurs," he began, his voice soft but resonant. "The truth, it is like a delicate thread, easily overlooked yet strong enough to bind the guilty. We have heard your stories, your alibis, but now we turn to the details. One small inconsistency, one gesture, one word. It is enough to reveal the murderer." Inspector Gibbs, standing by the door, fidgeted with his notebook, his earlier confidence in Victor Langston's guilt shaken by Poirot's relentless probing. The financier, still the inspector's prime suspect, sat with a scowl, his fingers drumming on the armrest. Lady Eleanor Haverford, pale but composed, clutched her handkerchief, while Dr. Lionel Cresswell's sharp gaze followed Poirot's every move. Margaret Cresswell twisted her pearl necklace, her anxiety palpable. Clara Beaumont's poised smile seemed strained, and Penelope Ward, Sir Reginald's niece, sat with her book closed, her eyes fixed on the empty glass case that had once held the Codex Aureus. Father Thomas Brennan, serene as ever, murmured a prayer, his fingers tracing his cross. Poirot's attention turned to the Codex Aureus, the blood-stained manuscript that had lain beside Sir Reginald's body. He had requested it be brought to the drawing room, and now it rested on a table, its pages open to the section on medieval poisons. "This book," Poirot said, his gloved fingers hovering over the vellum. "It is a curiosity, no?" Why was it open to this page? Sir Reginald was stabbed, not poisoned. Yet the killer, or someone, wished us to see this. Why? Hastings, recalling the scene in the study, felt a prickle of excitement. The codex had seemed a grim coincidence, but Poirot's tone suggested otherwise. "A distraction, Poirot?" he ventured. "Perhaps, Hastings," Poirot replied, his eyes gleaming. "Or perhaps a clue, hidden in plain sight. Let us examine." He turned to the page, reading aloud a Latin phrase. "Venenum occultum, veritas revelata." He translated for the group. "The hidden poison reveals the truth." Most intriguing, oui, but what truth does it reveal? The guests shifted uncomfortably, their eyes darting to one another. Poirot's gaze settled on Dr. Cresswell. "Monsieur le Docteur," he said, "you are a man of science, familiar with poisons, I presume. Did Sir Reginald ever speak of this page or of poisons in his collection?" Cresswell's expression was guarded. "We discussed the codex once, as scholars. He was fascinated by its annotations, particularly those on alchemy and toxicology. But he never mentioned this specific page." His voice was steady, but Margaret Cresswell's hand froze on her necklace, her breath catching. Poirot nodded, turning to Lady Eleanor. "Madame, your husband, he was a man of passions. This codex, it was his treasure. Did he share its secrets with you?" Lady Eleanor's lips tightened. "He spoke of it often, but not in detail. He said it held knowledge that could change perspectives. I didn't pry." Her hesitation was subtle, but Poirot's eyes narrowed. The detective then produced the handwritten note found in the study, its elegant script reading, "Meet me at 11:30. The truth must be told." He held it up, his voice measured. This note, it suggests a rendezvous. Yet Sir Reginald was alone when he died. Or was he? Who wrote this, and why was it hidden in a book? The room fell silent, the guests exchanging wary glances. Penelope Ward's fingers tightened on her book, and Victor Langston's scowl deepened. Clara Beaumont's smile faltered, and Father Brennan's prayer paused. Poirot's gaze lingered on each, as if weighing their reactions. He then turned to the butler, Jenkins, who stood discreetly by the door. "Monsieur Jenkins," Poirot said, "you served Sir Reginald for many years, oui? Did you notice anything unusual last night before the scream?" Jenkins, a man of stoic demeanor, hesitated. "Sir Reginald was agitated, sir. After dinner, he asked me to ensure the codex was locked in its case. He seemed anxious more than usual, and—" He paused, glancing at Lady Eleanor. "He received a letter earlier that day, sir. He read it in the study and burned it immediately." Poirot's eyes gleamed. "Burned it, you say? Most interesting, and where are the ashes?" "In the fireplace, sir," Jenkins replied. "I haven't touched it since." Poirot moved to the study, Hastings and Gibbs following. The fireplace held a small pile of ashes, and Poirot sifted through them with a poker, retrieving a charred fragment. The paper was brittle, but a single word was legible. "Debt." Poirot's lips twitched. "A clue, Hastings. A debt, financial, emotional, or otherwise. It connects to our killer, I am certain." Returning to the drawing room, Poirot shifted his focus to the alibis, probing the Eolge timeline with surgical precision. "Let us reconstruct," he said. At 11:30, Sir Reginald was alive, perhaps meeting someone. By 11:52, he was dead, and Lady Eleanor screamed. 22 minutes, mes amis, a lifetime in a murder. Where were you precisely? Lady Eleanor reiterated her story of passing the study to post a letter, her voice steady but her eyes avoiding Poirot's. Dr. Cresswell and Clara Beaumont repeated their library conversation, though Clara's mention of Hedda Gabler now seemed rehearsed. Victor Langston, still defensive, insisted he was on the terrace, though the cigarette butt suggested otherwise. Penelope Ward's account of reading in the conservatory was unwavering, but her knowledge of the codex intrigued Poirot. Father Brennan's chapel prayers were serene, yet his cryptic remarks about sin lingered in Hastings' mind. Poirot then noticed a small detail that had escaped earlier scrutiny, a faint ink stain on Lady Eleanor's sleeve, barely visible against the silk of her gown. "Madame," he said, his tone deceptively casual, "you wrote a letter last night, oui?" The ink bottle in the study was overturned. "Curious, is it not, that your sleeve bears a mark?" Lady Eleanor's composure faltered. I may have brushed against the desk earlier," she said. "It's nothing." But her eyes betrayed a flicker of panic. Poirot smiled faintly. "Nothing, madame. In a murder, there is no such thing as nothing. Every detail speaks." He turned to the group, his voice rising. "The codex, the note, the ink, the ashes. These are not mere objects. They are the language of the crime, and Hercule Poirot, he speaks it fluently." As the guests dispersed for dinner, Poirot drew Hastings aside, his eyes alight with purpose. "Mon ami," he said, "we have found a clue in detail. The ink, the ashes, the page on poisons. They point not to the obvious, but to the hidden. The killer wishes us to chase shadows, but we shall follow the light." Hastings frowned. You suspect Lady Eleanor, don't you? That ink stain? Poirot's smile was enigmatic. I suspect everyone, Hastings, and no one. The little gray cells, they see what the eyes do not. The ink is a thread, but it is not the whole tapestry. We must look deeper, into the motives, the silences, the lies. As they joined the guests for a tense dinner, Hastings watched Poirot's every move. The detective's questions were like ripples spreading through the group, unsettling their carefully crafted facades. The codex, the note, the ink stain, each was a piece of the puzzle, and Poirot was assembling them with relentless precision. The murderer, Hastings knew, was growing nervous, and the little gray cells were closing in. Chapter 7. More Lies Surface. The evening shadows lengthened across Blackthorn Manor, their dark fingers creeping over the polished floors as the guests gathered in the dining room for a subdued dinner. The grandeur of the previous night's feast was absent, replaced by a strained silence broken only by the clink of cutlery and the occasional murmur. Hercule Poirot, seated at the table with Captain Arthur Hastings at his side, observed the group with the keenness of a predator studying its prey. The little Belgian detective's eyes, bright and unyielding, missed nothing. The flicker of a glance, the tightening of a hand, the unspoken tensions that simmered beneath the surface. Hastings, his notebook tucked discreetly in his pocket, felt the weight of the mystery pressing down. Sir Reginald Haverford's murder, with its locked study, blood-stained Codex Aureus, and cryptic note, had woven a web of deception that seemed to tighten with each passing hour. Poirot's probing questions had already exposed cracks in the guests' alibis, and now, as the candles flickered, Hastings sensed that more lies were about to surface. Poirot, his demeanor as impeccable as his attire, sipped his wine and addressed the group with deceptive calm. "Mesdames et messieurs," he said, his voice cutting through the silence. "A crime such as this, it is not merely an act of violence. It is a story, written in the choices of the guilty. Tonight we shall uncover more of this story, secrets, motives, truths hidden in the shadows." Inspector Gibbs, seated at the far end of the table, looked up from his plate, his frustration evident. "Monsieur Poirot, we've been over the alibis. Langston's still my man. His story about the terrace doesn't hold up, not with that cigarette butt you found." Victor Langston, across from Gibbs, bristled, but Poirot raised a hand, silencing the brewing argument. "Inspector," Poirot said, "the cigarette butt, it is a clue, oui, but not a verdict. Let us explore deeper waters. There are motives here, financial, personal, perhaps even passionate, that we have yet to uncover." His gaze swept over the guests, lingering on Lady Eleanor Haverford, whose composed exterior seemed to fray with each passing moment. Poirot turned to her, his tone gentle but incisive. "Madame, your husband, he was a man of influence with many connections. Were there disputes, perhaps, that weighed upon him? A debt? A betrayal?" Lady Eleanor's fork paused mid-air, her eyes meeting Poirot's for a fleeting moment before dropping to her plate. "Reginald had his share of disagreements," she said, her voice steady but thin. "Business matters mostly. He and Victor had argued about investments, as you know. And Dr. Cresswell challenged him on the authenticity of the Codex Aureus. But nothing serious, nothing to warrant." Her voice trailed off, and she reached for her wineglass, her hand trembling slightly. Poirot's eyes gleamed. "And yet, madame, there was a letter burned in the study with the word debt visible in the ashes. A financial debt, perhaps, or something more personal. The room stilled, the guests' attention sharpening. Victor Langston's face reddened. "I told you my business with Sir Reginald was settled," he snapped. "I paid what I owed him weeks ago. Check his ledgers if you don't believe me." Poirot nodded, his expression unreadable. "We shall, monsieur. But debts are not always measured in pounds and shillings. There are debts of loyalty, of trust, of love." His gaze flicked to Clara Beaumont, whose poised smile faltered for a moment. Clara, sensing the scrutiny, leaned forward, her voice smooth. "Monsieur Poirot, you're suggesting something quite dramatic. I assure you my connection to Sir Reginald was purely social. Victor and I are here as guests, nothing more." Her hand rested lightly on Langston's arm, but Hastings noted the tension in her fingers. Poirot's attention shifted to Dr. Lionel Cresswell, whose clinical demeanor had grown increasingly guarded. "Monsieur le Docteur," he said, "your disagreement with Sir Reginald over the Codex, it was academic, you say. Yet such disputes can become personal, non? Did he challenge your expertise, perhaps?" Cresswell's jaw tightened. "It was a professional difference," he said curtly. "Sir Reginald believed the Codex contained hidden annotations, a code of sorts. I thought it nonsense, a scholar's fantasy. We argued, but it was hardly grounds for murder." Beside him, Margaret Cresswell's necklace twisting intensified, her eyes darting to her husband. Poirot nodded, turning to Penelope Ward, whose quiet presence had grown more noticeable with each interview. "Mademoiselle," he said softly, "your uncle, he was protective, you said. Yet you hinted at his controlling nature. Did he perhaps impose restrictions on you? A matter of inheritance or marriage?" Penelope's pale cheeks flushed slightly. "Uncle Reginald wanted the best for me," she said, her voice low. "He disapproved of certain choices I made, my studies, my friends. He thought the Codex would secure my future, but I didn't care for it. I just wanted—" She paused, her eyes glistening. "I just wanted to be free." The word hung in the air, heavy with implication. Father Thomas Brennan, silent until now, spoke softly. "Freedom, my child, is a noble pursuit, but it can lead to temptation. Sir Reginald sought truth, but truth can be a heavy burden." His serene gaze met Poirot's, and Hastings sensed a deeper meaning in his words. As dinner concluded, Poirot requested a private word with Jenkins, the butler, who had been hovering discreetly. In the library, away from the guests, Poirot questioned him about Sir Reginald's habits. "He was a man of routine," Jenkins said. "Every night he spent an hour in his study reading or writing. But lately he was distracted. He received several letters. Some he burned, others he locked in his desk." Poirot's eyes lit up. "Locked, you say? And the key?" "In his pocket, sir," Jenkins replied. "The police found it on his body." Poirot and Hastings returned to the study where Gibbs had secured the desk. With the inspector's permission, Poirot unlocked it, revealing a small bundle of letters tied with string. Most were mundane, correspondence with scholars about the Codex. But one stood out, written in a hurried feminine hand. It read, "Reginald, we must speak. Your silence hurts us all. Meet me tonight." It was unsigned, but the paper matched the stationery in Lady Eleanor's room. Hastings' pulse quickened. "Another note, Poirot. And from Lady Eleanor by the look of it." Poirot's smile was enigmatic. "Perhaps, Hastings, Or perhaps someone wishes us to believe so. The ink, the handwriting, it is too convenient, no? We must verify. They returned to the drawing room where the guests had gathered for coffee. Poirot's demeanor shifted, his questions now laced with a subtle pressure. To Lady Eleanor, he mentioned the letter, watching her reaction. "I wrote no such thing," she insisted, her voice rising. "I told you my letter was to my sister." To Victor Langston, he pressed about the financial dispute, eliciting a grudging admission of a failed investment Sir Reginald had backed. To Clara, he inquired about her knowledge of medieval manuscripts, her answer evasive. Dr. Cresswell's academic rivalry took on a sharper edge when he admitted Sir Reginald had threatened to publish a paper discrediting him. Margaret Cresswell, when questioned, stammered about her letters, revealing she had written to a cousin about financial strain. Penelope's mention of her uncle's control hinted at a will that favored her, but only under strict conditions. Father Brennan spoke of confessions but refused to break their sanctity. As the evening wore on, the lies began to surface, each revelation a crack in the guests' facades. Poirot, his eyes gleaming, drew Hastings aside. "Mon ami," he said, "the truth emerges like a flower through stone. The letters, the debts, the rivalries, they are threads in a tapestry of betrayal. But one thread is missing, the why of the Codex." Hastings frowned. "You still think the Codex is central?" "Central, oui," Poirot replied. "It is not merely a book, but a symbol of power, of secrets, of truth. The killer used it to speak, and we shall listen." As the guests retired, their faces etched with unease, Hastings felt the mystery deepening. The murderer was among them, their lies unraveling, and Poirot's little gray cells were closing in on the truth. Chapter 8. The emotional turning point. The night had settled over Blackthorn Manor like a heavy shroud, the moon casting a pale glow through the tall windows of the drawing room where the guests remained, their faces drawn with fatigue and fear. The air was thick with the scent of wax and the lingering tension of unspoken truths. Hercule Poirot, his small figure a beacon of calm amid the storm, stood before the fireplace, his eyes gleaming with the intensity of a man on the cusp of a revelation. Captain Arthur Hastings, seated nearby, felt the weight of the moment. Sensing that the web of lies surrounding Sir Reginald Haverford's murder was about to unravel further. The evening had been fraught with revelations, letters, debts, rivalries, and the ever-present shadow of the Codex Aureus. Poirot's relentless probing had exposed cracks in the guests' alibis, and now, as the clock struck 9, the atmosphere was ripe for a breakthrough. Inspector Gibbs, his earlier confidence eroded, stood by the door, his notebook filled with contradictions but no clear answers. The guests, Lady Eleanor Haverford, Dr. Lionel Cresswell, Margaret Cresswell, Victor Langston, Clara Beaumont, Penelope Ward, and Father Thomas Brennan, sat in a tense semicircle, their eyes darting between Poirot and one another. Poirot, his hands clasped behind his back, began with a quiet intensity. "Mesdames et messieurs," he said, his voice cutting through the silence, "we have peeled back the layers of this crime, and what lies beneath is not merely a murder, but a tapestry of human passions, greed, fear, love, betrayal. Tonight one of you will break, and the truth, it will begin to emerge." His words hung in the air, and Hastings noted the reactions. Lady Eleanor's fingers tightened on her handkerchief. Dr. Cresswell's jaw clenched. Clara Beaumont's smile faltered, and Penelope Ward's eyes glistened with unshed tears. Victor Langston lit a cigarette, his hands unsteady, while Margaret Cresswell's necklace twisting reached a fever pitch. Father Brennan's serene facade seemed to waver, his fingers pausing on his cross. Poirot turned to Penelope Ward, whose quiet presence had grown increasingly significant. "Mademoiselle," he said softly, "you loved your Uncle, oui? Yet you spoke of his control, his conditions. Tell me, what did he demand of you?" Penelope's lips trembled, her hands clutching her book, the moonstone, as if it were a lifeline. He wanted me to marry," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "He had chosen a suitor, a man of wealth, to secure the family name. I refused. I wanted to study, to live my own life. We argued the day before." Her voice broke and a single tear fell, staining the book's cover. The room stilled, the weight of her confession settling over the group. Lady Eleanor's face paled, and she looked away as if struck by the words. Poirot's eyes gleamed, but he pressed gently. "And this argument, mademoiselle, it was heated, oui? Did he threaten to change his will?" Penelope nodded, her voice choked. "He said if I didn't comply, I'd lose everything, the estate, my inheritance. He thought the codex would be my dowry to tempt a husband. I told him I'd rather have nothing than live a lie." Her words, raw and unguarded, seemed to crack the air, and Hastings felt a pang of sympathy. Poirot turned to Lady Eleanor, whose composure was fraying. "Madam," he said, "your husband's will, it favored Mademoiselle Ward, but with conditions. Were you aware of this?" Lady Eleanor's eyes flickered with something, anger perhaps, or fear. "I knew he wanted Penelope settled," she said, her voice tight. "It was his way of ensuring the family's legacy. I tried to reason with him, but he was stubborn." Her hands twisted her handkerchief, and Hastings noted the ink stain on her sleeve, still visible in the candlelight. Poirot's gaze shifted to Dr. Cresswell, whose clinical demeanor had grown brittle. "Monsieur le Docteur," he said, "you argued with Sir Reginald about the codex. You called his theories nonsense. Was there more to this dispute? A personal slight, perhaps?" Cresswell's eyes narrowed. "It was academic," he said, his voice clipped. "He thought the codex held a hidden code, some mystical truth. I told him it was a fantasy, and he took it personally. He threatened to ruin my reputation, to publish a paper discrediting me." He paused, glancing at his wife. "But I didn't kill him for it." Margaret Cresswell, unable to contain herself, burst out, "It was humiliating." Reginald mocked Lionel in front of colleagues, saying he lacked vision. "It wasn't just academic. It hurt us, our standing, our future." Her voice cracked, and she buried her face in her hands, her necklace falling to the floor with a soft clatter. The outburst stunned the room, and Poirot's eyes gleamed with satisfaction. "Merci, madame," he said softly. "The truth, it begins to surface, like a stone breaking the water's calm." He turned to Victor Langston, whose cigarette smoke curled around him like a shield. "Monsieur," Poirot said, "your business with Sir Reginald, it was not as settled as you claim, oui? A debt, a failed venture, perhaps he demanded repayment." Langston's scowl deepened. "I told you it was settled. He invested in my company, yes, but it was a risk he took willingly. He was angry when it failed, but I didn't owe him anything by then." His voice was defiant, but his eyes darted to Clara, who remained silent. Clara Beaumont, sensing Poirot's attention, spoke before he could ask. Monsieur Poirot, she said, her voice smooth but strained. Victor and I have nothing to hide. Sir Reginald was a gracious host, nothing more. This talk of debts and motives, it's all speculation. Her poise was impeccable, but Hastings noted a flicker of unease in her eyes. Poirot's gaze lingered on her, then moved to Father Brennan. Mon père, he said, you speak of sin, of burdens. Did Sir Reginald confide in you, perhaps, about a secret that weighed upon him? The vicar's serene expression wavered. He spoke of guilt, he said slowly, of choices made long ago. He sought forgiveness, but I cannot break the seal of confession. I can only say he feared the truth would destroy those he loved. His words, heavy with implication, hung in the air. Poirot nodded, stepping back to survey the group. A pattern emerges, he said. Debts, betrayals, control, guilt. These are the threads of our tapestry. And the Codex Aureus, it is the knot that binds them. But there is one detail, one small inconsistency that speaks louder than all. He produced a small object from his pocket, a single pearl found near the study door during his earlier inspection. This pearl, he said, holding it up, it matches Madame Cresswell's necklace. Yet it was found outside the study where no one claims to have been. How did it come to be there? Margaret Cresswell gasped, her hands flying to her throat where the broken necklace lay. I don't know, she stammered. It must have fallen earlier. I was in my room writing letters. Her voice rose, and Dr. Cresswell placed a restraining hand on her shoulder, his expression dark. Poirot's smile was faint but knowing. A pearl, a letter, a burned note. These are not accidents, mes amis. They are the footprints of the guilty. And Hercule Poirot, he follows them. As the guests dispersed, their faces etched with fear and doubt, Poirot drew Hastings aside. Mon ami, he said, the emotional tide has turned. Madame Cresswell's outburst, Mademoiselle Ward's confession. They reveal the human heart behind the crime. The killer is growing nervous, and the little gray cells they are closing in. Hastings frowned. That pearl, Poirot, it points to Margaret. But her alibi... Alibis, Hastings, are like masks, Poirot replied. They conceal, but they do not erase. The pearl is a clue, but not the whole truth. We must look to the motives, the silences, the codex. Tomorrow we shall set a trap. As the manor settled into an uneasy sleep, Hastings felt the mystery deepening. The murderer was among them, their lies crumbling, and Poirot's relentless pursuit was about to force the truth into the open. Chapter 9. The Trap. The morning sun rose over Blackthorn Manor, its rays doing little to dispel the chill that had settled over the estate. The grand house, once a beacon of elegance, now felt like a cage, its walls holding the secrets of Sir Reginald Haverford's murder tightly within. Hercule Poirot, his small figure immaculate in a tailored suit, stood in the drawing-room, his eyes gleaming with the quiet confidence of a man who knew the endgame was near. Captain Arthur Hastings, at his side, felt the tension in the air, as if the very atmosphere anticipated the trap Poirot was about to set. The guests, summoned after a restless night, gathered with expressions ranging from weariness to dread. Lady Eleanor Haverford sat rigidly, her handkerchief a crumpled mass in her hands. Dr. Lionel Cresswell's sharp gaze was guarded, while his wife Margaret clutched her repaired pearl necklace, her nerves betraying her. Victor Langston's scowl was deeper than ever, his cigarette smoke curling like a barrier. Clara Beaumont's poised smile seemed brittle, and Penelope Ward, Sir Reginald's niece, clutched her copy of the Moonstone as if it were a shield. Father Thomas Brennan, serene but watchful, fingered his cross, his prayers a soft murmur. Inspector Gibbs, pacing by the fireplace, looked to Poirot with a mix of hope and frustration. "Monsieur Poirot," he said, "we've got motives aplenty. Langston's debts, Cresswell's rivalry, even Lady Eleanor's strained marriage. But we're no closer to proof. What's your plan?" Poirot's lips twitched in a faint smile. "Patience, Inspector," he said. "The proof, it is like a shy bird. It must be coaxed from its hiding place. Today we shall set a trap, not with force, but with the mind. The killer, they are clever, but Hercule Poirot, he is cleverer." He turned to the group, his voice calm but commanding. "Mesdames et messieurs, the truth of Sir Reginald's murder lies not in the dagger nor in the Codex Aureus, but in the hearts of those who dined with him. You have all spoken, but your words conceal as much as they reveal. Now we shall test those words." Poirot produced the handwritten note found in the study, its elegant script reading, "Meet me at 11:30, the truth must be told." He held it up, his eyes scanning the group. "This note," he said, "it lured Sir Reginald to his death. But who wrote it? And why was it hidden in a book only to be found by chance? I propose a test. Each of you will write a sample of your handwriting. A simple phrase, nothing more. We shall compare." The guests exchanged wary glances, but none dared refuse. Poirot handed out paper and pens, instructing them to write, "The truth must be told." As they complied, Hastings watched closely, noting the tension in their movements. Lady Eleanor's hand trembled slightly, her script precise but strained. Dr. Cresswell's writing was bold, almost defiant. Margaret's was shaky, her letters uneven. Victor Langston's scrawl was hasty, Clara Beaumont's elegant but deliberate. Penelope Ward's was neat, almost scholarly, and Father Brennan's was measured as if each letter were a prayer. Poirot collected the samples, his eyes gleaming as he compared them to the note. "Most interesting," he murmured, holding up two samples, Lady Eleanor's and Clara Beaumont's, whose scripts bore a striking resemblance to the original. "Mademoiselle," he said, "your handwriting, it is remarkably similar. One of you perhaps wrote this note, or perhaps someone wished it to seem so." Lady Eleanor's face paled. "I wrote no such note," she insisted. "I told you I was writing to my sister that night." Clara's smile tightened. "Nor I, Monsieur Poirot. Anyone could mimic handwriting with practice. This proves nothing." Her voice was smooth, but Hastings caught a flicker of unease in her eyes. Poirot nodded, undeterred. "Very well. Let us consider another detail. The pearl found near the study door matching Madame Cresswell's necklace. Madame, you claim it fell earlier, yet no one saw you near the study. How do you explain this?" Margaret Cresswell's hands flew to her necklace, her voice rising. "I don't know. I was in my room writing letters. Perhaps it caught on something earlier. I'm not careful with it." Her outburst drew a sharp glance from her husband, whose expression darkened. Poirot's gaze shifted to the Codex Aureus, now locked in a glass case for safekeeping. "This book," he said, "it was open to a page on poisons, yet Sir Reginald was stabbed. Why this page? A distraction or a message? Let us test another theory. Monsieur le Docteur, you are familiar with poisons, oui? Did Sir Reginald show signs of anything unusual before the dagger struck?" Dr. Cresswell's jaw tightened. "I examined him after death," he said. There were no signs of poisoning, only the stab wound. The codex page was likely a coincidence. His voice was firm, but Margaret's nervous glance suggested otherwise. Poirot's eyes gleamed. Coincidence, monsieur? Hercule Poirot does not believe in coincidences. Let us set our trap. He turned to the group, his voice rising with theatrical flair. Tonight we shall recreate the moments before the murder. Each of you will return to where you claim to have been at 11:30. I shall observe, and the truth, it will reveal itself. The guests hesitated, their faces etched with apprehension, but Poirot's authority was undeniable. At his direction they dispersed, Lady Eleanor to her room, Dr. Cresswell and Clara to the library, Victor Langston to the terrace, Margaret to her suite, Penelope to the conservatory, and Father Brennan to the chapel. Poirot, with Hastings and Gibbs, positioned himself in the corridor near the study, his watch in hand. As the clock neared 11:30, the manor grew silent, save for the soft creak of floorboards and the distant ticking of the hall clock. Poirot's eyes darted from door to door, his mind a whirl of calculations. Hastings, standing beside him, felt his pulse quicken. "What are you expecting, Poirot?" he whispered. "A mistake, Hastings," Poirot replied softly. "The killer, they are careful, but under pressure they will falter. Watch and listen." At precisely 11:30, a faint sound broke the silence, a soft thud from the direction of the library. Poirot's head snapped toward it, and he moved swiftly, Hastings and Gibbs following. In the library, they found Clara Beaumont standing by a bookshelf, a book in her hand, her face pale. Dr. Cresswell was nearby, his expression startled. "Mademoiselle," Poirot said, his voice sharp, "you dropped something, oui? Or perhaps you moved too quickly?" Clara's composure faltered. I was reaching for a book," she said. "It slipped." The book, a volume on medieval art, lay open on the floor, its pages creased. Poirot's eyes narrowed. "And yet, mademoiselle, you were to remain seated as you claimed to be last night. Why move now?" He bent to retrieve the book, noting a small mark, a smudge of ink on the spine. "Most curious," he murmured. Before Clara could respond, a cry came from the conservatory. Poirot and Hastings hurried there, finding Penelope Ward clutching her book, her face ashen. "I saw something," she whispered. "A shadow outside the window. It moved quickly." Poirot examined the window, its latch secure. "A shadow, mademoiselle? Or a memory of last night?" His tone was gentle, but his eyes were piercing. As they returned to the drawing room, the guests reassembled, their faces a mix of fear and suspicion. Poirot stood before them, his voice commanding. "The trap, it has sprung," he said. "A book falls, a shadow moves, an ink smudge appears. These are not accidents, mes amis. They are the cracks in the killer's facade. The little gray cells, they see all." Hastings watched as the guests shifted uncomfortably, their eyes darting. Lady Eleanor's handkerchief was a shredded ruin. Margaret's necklace snapped again, and Clara's poise was crumbling. The trap had worked, Hastings realized. The killer was rattled, and Poirot was closing in. "Tomorrow," Poirot declared, "we shall gather again, and the truth, it will be revealed. Sleep well, mes amis, if you can." As the guests dispersed, Poirot drew Hastings aside, his eyes alight. "Mon ami," he said, "the killer has made their first mistake. The ink, the book, the shadow, they betray a nervous hand. We are close, Hastings, very close." Chapter 10. The Reveal. The morning light streamed through the tall windows of Blackthorn Manor's drawing room, casting a stark clarity over the gathered guests, whose faces were etched with a mixture of dread and anticipation. The air was thick with the scent of polished wood and the faint tang of nervous perspiration, as if the very walls knew the moment of truth had arrived. Hercule Poirot, his small figure radiating an almost theatrical authority, stood before the fireplace, his mustache perfectly waxed, his eyes gleaming with the triumph of a mind that had unraveled the impossible. Captain Arthur Hastings, seated near the window, felt his heart race, knowing that Poirot's trap set the previous night had ensnared the killer, and now the final act of this grim drama was about to unfold. The guests, Lady Eleanor Haverford, Dr. Lionel Cresswell, Margaret Cresswell, Victor Langston, Clara Beaumont, Penelope Ward, and Father Thomas Brennan, sat in a tense semicircle, their eyes fixed on Poirot. Inspector Gibbs, his notebook clutched tightly, stood by the door, his earlier bluster replaced by a grudging respect for the little Belgian detective. The Codex Aureus, locked in its glass case, seemed to loom over the room, its blood-stained pages a silent witness to the crime. Poirot clasped his hands behind his back, his voice clear and commanding. "Mesdames et messieurs," he began, "we have journeyed through a labyrinth of lies, motives, and secrets to arrive at this moment, the moment of truth. Sir Reginald Haverford was murdered in his study, stabbed with a dagger, the Codex Aureus open beside him. A note, a pearl, a cigarette butt, an ink stain. These were the threads of our tapestry, and now Hercule Poirot shall weave them into the truth." He paused, his gaze sweeping over the group, each guest shifting under its weight. "Let us begin with the facts," he continued. "Sir Reginald was killed at approximately 11:30 in a locked study, the window secure, the door ajar. The codex was open to a page on poisons, yet the dagger was the weapon. A note reading, 'Meet me at 11:30, the truth must be told,' was found hidden in a book. A pearl from Madame Cresswell's necklace was found near the study door. A cigarette butt not on the terrace but in the gravel suggested Monsieur Langston's alibi was false, and an ink stain on Madame Haverford's sleeve hinted at her presence in the study. These clues, they pointed in many directions, but only one leads to the killer." Hastings leaned forward, his notebook forgotten, as Poirot's voice took on a rhythmic cadence, each word a step toward revelation. "First, the alibis," Poirot said. "Each of you claimed to be elsewhere. Madame Haverford in her room, Dr. Cresswell and Mademoiselle Beaumont in the library, Monsieur Langston on the terrace, Madame Cresswell writing letters, Mademoiselle Ward in the conservatory, and Father Brennan in the chapel. Yet the timing, it is too perfect, no? 22 minutes between the meeting and the scream, a lifetime in a murder." He turned to Victor Langston, whose scowl had deepened. "Monsieur Langston, you were quick to deny debts to Sir Reginald, yet the burned letter with the word debt suggests otherwise. Your cigarette butt found in the gravel, not the terrace, places you closer to the study, but were you the killer? Non, you were a distraction, a red herring, as my friend Hastings would say." Langston's face reddened, but he said nothing, his hands gripping the armrests. Poirot's gaze shifted to Lady Eleanor. "Madame, your ink-stained sleeve and the letter in your handwriting suggested guilt. Yet your grief, it is genuine, oui? You loved your husband despite his flaws. The ink was a mistake, not a confession. You brushed the desk earlier, as you said. Lady Eleanor's eyes filled with tears, but she nodded, her composure fraying. Poirot turned to Dr. Cresswell and Margaret. Monsieur le Docteur, your rivalry with Sir Reginald was bitter, and Madame Cresswell's pearl placed her near the crime. Yet your alibi, corroborated by Mademoiselle Beaumont, holds. The pearl was a misstep, dropped earlier, perhaps, as Madame claimed. Margaret's shoulders sagged with relief, but Dr. Cresswell's expression remained guarded. Poirot's eyes then settled on Clara Beaumont, whose poised smile had vanished. Mademoiselle, he said, your charm is formidable, but your alibi with Dr. Cresswell, it is too convenient. Last night in our trap you dropped a book marked with ink. Why? Because you were nervous, oui? You knew more than you admitted. Clara's lips parted, but no words came. Poirot continued, his voice rising. And Mademoiselle Ward, your confession of your uncle's control revealed a motive, yet your grief, it is too raw, too real. You did not kill him. Father Brennan, your cryptic words of sin and guilt hinted at knowledge, but your role is that of observer, not actor. He paused, letting the silence build, then stepped forward, his voice a blade. The Codex Aureus, it was the key, not its value, but its message. The page on poisons was no coincidence. Sir Reginald was not stabbed alone. He was poisoned first, a sedative to slow him, administered in his wine at dinner. The dagger was a flourish, a distraction to hide the true method. The autopsy inspector will confirm this. Gibbs's eyes widened, but he nodded, scribbling furiously. Poirot's gaze locked on Clara Beaumont. Mademoiselle Beaumont, he said, you are an actress, skilled in deception. You knew of the Codex's annotations, for Sir Reginald confided in you not as a guest but as his mistress. You wrote the note, luring him to the study where you poisoned his wine earlier and stabbed him to ensure his silence. Your affair, it was a secret he threatened to reveal, destroying your engagement to Monsieur Langston and your career. Clara's face paled, her hands trembling. That's absurd, she cried. I was in the library. Non, Poirot said, his voice cutting. You slipped to the study using the corridor's shadows. The ink smudge on the book you dropped last night matches the overturned bottle in the study. You opened the Codex to poisons to mislead us, but you underestimated Hercule Poirot. The room erupted in gasps, Victor Langston leaping to his feet. Clara, tell him it's a lie, he roared, but her silence was damning. She sank back, her eyes filling with tears, and Poirot's voice softened. You loved him, perhaps, but you loved your future more. The note, the pearl, the ink. They betrayed you. Clara's shoulders shook and she whispered, he was going to tell Victor. Ruin everything. I had no choice. Her confession, raw and broken, filled the room, and Gibbs moved to restrain her, his face a mix of shock and triumph. Poirot stepped back, his expression somber. The little gray cells, they see what others miss. The truth, it is painful, but it is free. As Clara was led away, the guests sat in stunned silence, the weight of the revelation settling over them. Hastings, his heart pounding, looked at Poirot with awe. You knew, Poirot, he said, from the ink, the note, all of it. Poirot's smile was faint. The details, Hastings, they speak when one listens. Now let us leave this house to its ghosts. The manor, once a stage for murder, seemed to exhale as the truth emerged, and Poirot, his work done, prepared to depart, his little gray cells victorious once more. Chapter 11. The reflection. The late morning sun bathed Blackthorn Manor in a serene glow, its rays filtering through the drawing room's tall windows, softening the harsh edges of the tragedy that had unfolded within its walls. The air, once thick with suspicion and fear, now carried a quiet solemnity, as if the manor itself exhaled in relief at the unveiling of Sir Reginald Haverford's murderer. Hercule Poirot, his small figure as immaculate as ever, stood by the fireplace, his hands clasped behind his back, his eyes reflective yet sharp. Captain Arthur Hastings, seated near the window, felt a mix of awe and melancholy, the weight of Clara Beaumont's confession still lingering in his mind. The guests, now diminished by Clara's removal to police custody, sat in a subdued circle. Lady Eleanor Haverford, her face pale but composed, clutched a fresh handkerchief, her grief tempered by a newfound resolve. Dr. Lionel Cresswell and his wife Margaret sat close, her nervous habit of twisting her necklace abandoned, replaced by a weary acceptance. Victor Langston, his bravado shattered by Clara's betrayal, stared at the floor, his cigarette unlit. Penelope Ward, Sir Reginald's niece, held her copy of The Moonstone loosely, her eyes red but steady. Father Thomas Brennan, his serene demeanor restored, murmured a soft prayer, his cross glinting in the sunlight. Inspector Gibbs, standing by the door, scribbled in his notebook, his earlier frustration replaced by a grudging admiration for Poirot's genius. Poirot, his voice soft but resonant, addressed the group one final time. "Mesdames et messieurs," he said, "the truth has been revealed, and the shadow of murder lifts from Blackthorn Manor. Yet the truth, it is not merely a solution, it is a mirror, reflecting the frailties of the human heart. Hercule Poirot has solved the puzzle, but now we reflect on what it teaches us." Hastings, ever attentive, noted the philosophical tone in Poirot's voice, a hallmark of his friend's method after a case was closed. The little Belgian detective stepped forward, his eyes sweeping over the group. "This crime," he continued, "it was born of passion, of fear, of a desire to protect a future at the cost of a life. Mademoiselle Beaumont, she chose to silence Sir Reginald, believing it would preserve her love, her career, her freedom. But the truth, it cannot be silenced. It speaks through the smallest details, the ink, the pearl, the codex aureus, and it demands to be heard." Lady Eleanor's voice, barely above a whisper, broke the silence. "Monsieur Poirot, how did you know it was Clara? So many clues pointed elsewhere. Victor's cigarette, my ink stain, Margaret's pearl." Her eyes, filled with a mix of gratitude and sorrow, met his. Poirot's lips twitched in a faint smile. "Madame, the clues, they are like stars in a constellation. Each shines, but only together do they form a picture. The cigarette butt suggested Monsieur Langston's guilt, but it was too obvious a distraction. The ink on your sleeve was a mistake, not a confession. The pearl, it fell from Madame Cresswell's necklace earlier, as she claimed. But the codex, open to poisons, and the note in Mademoiselle Beaumont's hand, they were the heart of the matter." He turned to the glass case where the Codex Aureus rested, its blood-stained pages a grim reminder. "This book," he said, "it was not merely a prop. Sir Reginald believed it held secrets, a code to unlock truths. Mademoiselle Beaumont, she knew of his obsession, for he confided in her during their liaison. She used the codex to mislead us, opening it to a page on poisons to suggest a different method of death. But the autopsy, it confirmed my suspicion, a sedative in his wine, slowing him before the dagger struck. The poison was subtle, the dagger dramatic, but together they betrayed her. Victor Langston's voice, hoarse with anger, interrupted. "She played me for a fool," he muttered. "All those promises, and she was with him. Why didn't I see it?" Poirot's gaze softened. "Monsieur, the heart, it blinds us to truths we do not wish to see. Mademoiselle Beaumont was skilled in deception, as an actress must be. But her mistake was in underestimating the little gray cells." Dr. Cresswell, his tone measured but curious, spoke next. "The note, Monsieur Poirot. How did you know it was Clara's? The handwriting could have been forged." Poirot nodded. "A fair question, monsieur. The note, it was written in a hand similar to Madame Haverford's to cast suspicion. But in our trap last night, Mademoiselle Beaumont's nervousness betrayed her. The book she dropped, marked with ink, matched the overturned bottle in the study. Her movements, her glances, they spoke of guilt. The handwriting, it was hers, confirmed by the samples you all provided." Penelope Ward, her voice soft but steady, added, "Uncle Reginald trusted her. He spoke of her charm, her intelligence. I never imagined—" Her words trailed off and she looked down, her fingers tracing the edges of her book. Poirot's expression was somber. "Mademoiselle, your uncle was a man of passions, but also of burdens. He sought to control, to protect, but in doing so he sowed the seeds of his own tragedy. The Codex, it was his obsession, but also his undoing. It drew Mademoiselle Beaumont's ambition, her fear, her desperation." Father Brennan, his voice gentle, spoke last. "Monsieur Poirot, you have brought justice, but at a cost. This house, it will carry the weight of this sin for years to come." Poirot inclined his head. "Mon père, justice is a light in the darkness, but it cannot erase the shadows. Yet we must strive for it always, for it is the truth that sets us free." As the guests absorbed his words, Poirot turned to Gibbs, who was preparing to depart with his report. "Inspector," he said, "you have the confession, the evidence. The case is yours to close. But remember, the truth, it is not found in haste, but in patience, in observation, in the little gray cells." Gibbs nodded, a rare smile breaking through. "You've done us a service, Monsieur Poirot. I'll see to it the report reflects your work." Poirot bowed slightly, then turned to Hastings. "Mon ami, come. We shall take a walk in the gardens before we depart. The air, it clears the mind." As they stepped onto the terrace, the rose garden blooming vibrantly despite the tragedy, Hastings felt a sense of closure. "You were brilliant, Poirot," he said. "The way you pieced it together, the poison, the note, the ink. But how did you know the Codex was a misdirection?" Poirot's eyes twinkled. "Hastings, the Codex was too perfect, too theatrical. A killer does not leave such a clue unless they wish it to be seen. Mademoiselle Beaumont, she played her role well, but she forgot that Hercule Poirot, he sees through the performance." They walked in silence for a moment, the gravel crunching underfoot. Poirot paused by a rose bush, its petals vibrant against the green. "Life, Hastings," he said softly. "It is like these roses, beautiful but fragile, easily bruised by greed, by passion. We must cherish the truth, for it is the only thing that endures." As they prepared to leave Blackthorn Manor, the weight of the case lifted, replaced by a quiet satisfaction. The murderer was caught, the truth revealed, and Poirot, with his little gray cells, had once again brought order to chaos. The manor, now silent, would heal in time, but for now it stood as a testament to the power of truth and the genius of Hercule Poirot. Chapter 12. The Unseen Ripples. The afternoon sun cast a warm, golden hue over Blackthorn Manor's sprawling gardens, where Hercule Poirot and Captain Arthur Hastings strolled along the gravel paths, the scent of roses mingling with the crisp air. The manor, though still grand, seemed quieter now, its walls no longer vibrating with the tension of an unsolved murder. Clara Beaumont's confession had lifted the veil of suspicion, yet Hastings sensed an undercurrent of unease, as if the ripples of the crime still lingered, unseen but potent. Poirot, his small figure impeccable as always, walked with a measured pace, his eyes distant yet alert, as if his mind were still sifting through the case's finer details. "Poirot," Hastings ventured, breaking the silence, "you've solved the murder and Clara's in custody, but something tells me you're not entirely satisfied. Is there more to this than we've seen?" Poirot's lips twitched in a faint smile, his mustache catching the sunlight. "Mon ami, you are perceptive, as always. The case, it is closed, the killer is caught, the truth revealed. Yet the human heart, it is a complex thing, and the motives behind a crime, they leave echoes. Hercule Poirot, he does not merely solve a murder. He seeks to understand its why." They paused by a stone bench overlooking the rose garden, and Poirot gestured for Hastings to sit. "Let us reflect, Hastings," he said, his voice soft but deliberate. "Mademoiselle Beaumont killed Sir Reginald to protect her secrets, her affair, her engagement, her ambitions. But why did Sir Reginald confide in her? Why did he risk so much for a manuscript, the Codex Aureus? These questions, they linger, non?" Hastings nodded, his mind replaying the case's intricacies. The blood-stained codex, the note, the ink stain, the pearl. "You think there's more to the codex than we realized? Clara used it as a misdirection, but was there something else Sir Reginald knew?" Poirot's eyes gleamed. "Précisément, Hastings. The codex, it was not merely a prop in her deception. Sir Reginald believed it held a secret, a code perhaps, or a truth that threatened someone beyond Mademoiselle Beaumont. We must consider the unseen ripples, the connections that lie beneath the surface." Their conversation was interrupted by the soft crunch of gravel as Penelope Ward approached, her pale face framed by dark curls, her copy of the Moonstone tucked under her arm. "Monsieur Poirot," she said, her voice hesitant but resolute, I wanted to thank you for finding the truth. Uncle Reginald deserved justice, even if it hurts." Poirot inclined his head, his expression kind but probing. "Mademoiselle, your gratitude, it is appreciated, but tell me. Your uncle, he spoke of the codex as a treasure, oui. Did he ever hint at its deeper significance?" Penelope's eyes flickered, and she glanced at the manor as if its walls might overhear. "He said it was more than a manuscript," she admitted. "He believed it contained annotations, notes from a medieval scholar hidden in the margins about a secret society. He thought it could expose something dangerous. I thought it was just his obsession, but now—" Her voice trailed off, and she shivered slightly. Poirot's gaze sharpened. "A secret society, you say? Most interesting. And did he share this with anyone else?" Penelope hesitated. "He mentioned discussing it with Dr. Cresswell, but they argued, and I think he told Clara too. She was always asking him about his work, charming him." Her lips tightened. a flicker of anger crossing her face. Poirot nodded, his mind clearly racing. Merci, mademoiselle. You have given me much to consider. Rest now your uncle's legacy, it will endure. As Penelope retreated, Hastings turned to Poirot, his curiosity piqued. A secret society, Poirot? Do you think there's truth to it, or was Sir Reginald chasing shadows? Poirot's smile was enigmatic. Shadows, Hastings, can cast long truths. Sir Reginald was a man of intellect, but also of ambition. If he believed the Codex held such a secret, it may explain why he was so guarded, so controlling. We must speak with Dr. Cresswell. They returned to the manor where the guests were dispersing, their lives forever altered by the events of the past days. Dr. Cresswell was in the library, poring over a medical journal, his wife Margaret nearby, her nervous energy subdued. Poirot approached, his manner polite but direct. Monsieur le Docteur, he said, a word, if you please. The Codex Aureus, you argued with Sir Reginald about its annotations. What did he claim they revealed? Cresswell's eyes narrowed, but he set the journal aside. He was fanciful, he said, his tone clipped. He thought the margins contained coded messages, references to a medieval order that influenced powerful families. I told him it was nonsense, scholarly speculation, not fact. He took it personally, accused me of lacking vision. His voice held a trace of bitterness, and Margaret's hand reached for his, a silent gesture of support. Poirot's gaze lingered. And yet, monsieur, you examined the Codex closely, oui? Did you see anything to suggest he was right? Cresswell hesitated, then shook his head. Nothing concrete. The annotations were in Latin, cryptic, but they could be anything. Recipes, prayers, nonsense. I didn't care enough to pursue it. Poirot nodded, his expression unreadable. Merci, monsieur. Your candor, it is noted. As they left the library, Hastings sensed Poirot's mind at work. You think the Codex is still key, don't you? He asked. Even with Clara's confession. Poirot paused in the corridor, his eyes distant. The Codex, Hastings. It was the spark that lit the fire. Mademoiselle Beaumont killed to protect her secrets, but Sir Reginald's obsession with the manuscript, it touched others. The ripples they spread to Mademoiselle Ward's inheritance, to Monsieur Langston's debts, to Madame Haverford's marriage. We have solved the murder, but the Codex's secret, it remains. They returned to the drawing room where Lady Eleanor was sorting through papers, preparing for the estate's future. Poirot approached, his voice gentle. Madame, he said, your husband's work with the Codex, did he speak of a secret, something that might have endangered him? Lady Eleanor's hand stilled, her eyes meeting his. He was secretive, she admitted. He said the Codex held truths that could shake foundations, but he wouldn't elaborate. I thought it was his pride, his need to be important. Now I wonder. Her voice faltered, and she looked away. Poirot bowed slightly. Merci, madame. Your husband's legacy, it will be honored. As they stepped outside, Poirot turned to Hastings, his expression somber. Mon ami, the case is closed, but the heart of Blackthorn Manor beats on. The Codex, it may hold secrets we cannot yet uncover, a society, a code, a truth. But for now, we leave it to its silence. Hastings nodded, feeling the weight of the unresolved. Will you pursue it, Poirot? The Codex's secret? Poirot's smile was faint but knowing. Perhaps, Hastings, in time. But for now, the little gray cells, they rest. Justice has been served, and that is enough. As they prepared to depart, the manor loomed behind them, its secrets still whispering in the shadows. Poirot, his work done, walked toward the waiting car, his steps light but purposeful, leaving Blackthorn Manor to its ghosts and its unseen ripples. Chapter 13. The Echoes of Truth. The late afternoon sun hung low over Blackthorn Manor, its golden rays casting long shadows across the estate's manicured lawns. The air was heavy with the scent of late summer roses, and a quiet melancholy had settled over the house, as if it mourned not only Sir Reginald Haverford's death, but also the secrets that had unraveled in its wake. Hercule Poirot, his small figure as precise and composed as ever, stood on the terrace, his eyes fixed on the horizon, his mind still turning over the intricacies of the case. Captain Arthur Hastings at his side felt a lingering unease, as though the resolution of Clara Beaumont's guilt had left unanswered questions rippling beneath the surface. "Poirot," Hastings said, breaking the silence, "you've caught the murderer, and justice has been served. Yet you seem unsettled. Is it the Codex Aureus? Do you believe there's more to its secrets?" Poirot's lips curved in a faint, enigmatic smile, his mustache glinting in the sunlight. "Mon ami, you know me too well. The case, it is closed. Clara Beaumont killed Sir Reginald to protect her affair, her engagement, her future. But the Codex, it is like a melody that lingers after the song has ended. Its secrets they echo, and Hercule Poirot, he cannot ignore an echo." They walked slowly toward the rose garden, the gravel crunching underfoot, and Poirot's voice took on a reflective tone. "The truth, Hastings, it is not a single note but a symphony. We have resolved the murder, but the motives, the connections, they spread beyond the act itself. Sir Reginald's obsession with the Codex, his belief in a hidden code, a secret society, it touched lives in ways we have yet to fully understand." Their conversation was interrupted by the soft approach of Father Thomas Brennan, his black cassock a stark contrast to the vibrant garden. The vicar's serene demeanor was tempered by a shadow of concern, his hands clasped around his cross. "Monsieur Poirot," he said, his voice gentle but weighted, "I wish to speak with you before you depart. This house, it carries a burden even now. Sir Reginald's death, Clara's confession, they are but the surface of a deeper wound." Poirot's eyes narrowed, his interest piqued. "Mon père, you speak of burdens, of sins. Did Sir Reginald confide in you something more than you have shared? Something about the Codex, perhaps?" Father Brennan hesitated, his fingers tightening on his cross. "The seal of confession binds me, Monsieur Poirot, but I can say this. Sir Reginald was troubled by what he found in that manuscript. He spoke of a truth that could ruin reputations, not just his own, but others. He feared it would bring danger to those he loved." His gaze drifted to the manor, where Lady Eleanor and Penelope were visible through a window, sorting through papers. Poirot nodded, his expression thoughtful. "Merci, mon père. Your words, they add another thread to our tapestry. The Codex, it seems, was more than a scholar's obsession. It was a Pandora's box." As Father Brennan retreated, Hastings frowned. "Poirot, do you think Sir Reginald's discovery put him in danger beyond Clara's motives? Could someone else have wanted him silenced?" Poirot's eyes gleamed. "A possibility, Hastings. The Codex's annotations, if they indeed point to a secret society, could implicate powerful figures. Sir Reginald, he was not a man to keep such a secret quietly. We must speak with those closest to him once more." They returned to the manor where Lady Eleanor and Penelope were in the library, surrounded by stacks of documents. Lady Eleanor, her face drawn but resolute, looked up as they entered. "Monsieur Poirot," she said, "you've given us closure, but the estate, it's a tangle of debts and obligations. Reginald's obsession with the codex cost us dearly." Poirot's gaze was gentle but probing. "Madame, your husband believed the codex held a great secret, a code perhaps tied to a society of influence. Did he ever share such thoughts with you?" Lady Eleanor's hands stilled on a ledger, her eyes flickering with unease. "He spoke of it vaguely," she admitted. "He said the manuscript's margins contained names, dates, coded messages about a group that shaped history. I thought it was his imagination, a way to feel important. But he was afraid in his last days. He locked the codex away, said it was dangerous." Penelope, sorting letters nearby, added softly, "He told me it could change how we see the past. He wanted to publish his findings, but he was waiting for proof. He said someone was watching him." Her voice trembled and she clutched her book tightly. Poirot's eyes gleamed. "Most interesting. And this proof, did he find it?" Penelope shook her head. "I don't know. He kept his notes locked in his desk, but the police found nothing but letters." Poirot exchanged a glance with Hastings, his mind clearly racing. "Merci, mademoiselle, madame. Your words, they illuminate the shadows." They moved to the study where Inspector Gibbs was overseeing the final collection of evidence. Poirot requested access to Sir Reginald's desk once more, and Gibbs, now deferential to the detective's genius, complied. The desk yielded little at first, more correspondence, scholarly notes, but Poirot's keen eyes spotted a hidden compartment, revealed by a slight irregularity in the wood. Inside was a single sheet written in Sir Reginald's hand, a list of names, cryptic symbols, and dates, with a note, "The Order of the Saffron Veil, proof lies in the margins." Hastings' pulse quickened. "Poirot, this is it, the secret he was chasing." Poirot's expression was grave. "Oui, Hastings, but it is a dangerous truth. These names, some are familiar, men of power, long dead, but with living heirs. The codex's annotations, they may indeed point to a society that shaped events in secret. Sir Reginald's pursuit of this truth made him a target, but not for Clara alone." They returned to the drawing room where Dr. Lionel Cresswell and Margaret were gathered with Victor Langston. Poirot's questions were sharp now, his focus on the codex's deeper implications. "Monsieur le Docteur," he said, "you dismissed Sir Reginald's theories as nonsense, yet you studied the codex. Did you see these names, this Order of the Saffron Veil?" Cresswell's jaw tightened. "He mentioned it once in passing. I thought it a delusion, a scholar's fantasy. I saw no proof." His voice was firm, but Margaret's nervous glance suggested unease. Poirot turned to Langston. "And you, monsieur, your investments with Sir Reginald, were they tied to this manuscript perhaps to fund his research?" Langston's scowl returned. "He wanted money for some grand project. Yes, I refused. It was too risky. That's all I know." His tone was defensive, but his eyes darted away. As the day waned, Poirot drew Hastings aside, his voice low. "Mon ami, the codex's secret, it is a shadow we cannot fully grasp. Clara's motive was personal, but Sir Reginald's discovery, it touched others, perhaps beyond this house. We have solved the murder, but the echoes of truth, they linger." Hastings nodded, his mind racing. Will you pursue it, Poirot? This society, these names? Poirot's smile was wistful. For now, Hastings, we leave it to the historians. The little gray cells, they have done their work. But the truth, it has a way of resurfacing. As they prepared to depart, the manor stood silent, its secrets only partially revealed. The Codex Aureus, locked away, held truths that might never see the light, but Poirot's genius had brought justice to Blackthorn Manor, leaving its echoes to fade in time. Chapter 14. The Shadows of Legacy. The twilight cast a soft, violet hue over Blackthorn Manor, its ancient walls absorbing the fading light as if reluctant to relinquish their secrets. The air was cool, carrying the faint scent of damp earth and wilting roses, a reminder of the transient nature of both beauty and truth. Hercule Poirot, his small figure as meticulous as ever in his tailored suit, stood on the terrace, his hands clasped behind his back, his eyes fixed on the horizon where the last rays of sun dipped below the hills. Captain Arthur Hastings at his side felt a quiet reverence for the moment, sensing that the resolution of Sir Reginald Haverford's murder, though complete, had left a legacy of unanswered questions that stirred Poirot's restless mind. "Poirot," Hastings said, his voice low, "Clara's confession tied up the murder, but this business with the Codex Aureus and the Order of the Saffron Veil, it feels unfinished. Are you truly content to leave it here?" Poirot's lips curved in a wistful smile, his mustache catching the twilight's glow. "Mon ami, contentment is not the goal of Hercule Poirot. The truth, it is like a river. It flows where it will, and we cannot always follow its course. We have brought justice to Sir Reginald, but the Codex's secrets, they are a shadow we may only glimpse." They walked slowly along the gravel path, the crunch of their footsteps a soft counterpoint to the evening stillness. Poirot's voice took on a reflective tone. "The murder? It was a crime of passion, of fear. Mademoiselle Beaumont sought to protect her future. But Sir Reginald's pursuit of the Codex's hidden truth, this order of the Saffron Veil, it touched lives beyond her own. The ripples, Hastings, they spread far." Their conversation was interrupted by the approach of Lady Eleanor Haverford, her silk gown whispering against the gravel. Her face, though still pale, bore a new strength, as if the weight of her husband's death had settled into a resolve to move forward. "Monsieur Poirot," she said, her voice steady but tinged with gratitude, "you've given us closure, but the manor, it feels haunted by what Reginald left behind. The Codex, his papers. Should I destroy them to end this?" Poirot's eyes softened, but his tone was firm. "Madam, to destroy is to bury the truth, and the truth it deserves to breathe. The Codex, it may hold secrets that are dangerous, but they are also a part of your husband's legacy. Preserve it, study it, but with caution. The Order of the Saffron Veil, if it exists, is not your burden to bear alone." Lady Eleanor nodded, her hands clutching a shawl. "He was so consumed by it," she said. "He believed those annotations named families, powerful ones tied to secrets centuries old. I thought it madness, but now, I wonder if he was right." Poirot's gaze sharpened. "And did he name these families, madam?" She hesitated, then shook her head. "Not directly. He kept his notes locked away, said it was too dangerous to speak aloud. But he mentioned one name, Langston. Not Victor, but an ancestor tied to the manuscript's history." Hastings' pulse quickened. "Langston? Could Victor have known?" Poirot's smile was enigmatic. A question, Hastings, that we shall explore. Let us speak with Monsieur Langston. They found Victor Langston in the drawing room, slumped in an armchair, a glass of brandy in his hand. The financier's earlier bravado was gone, replaced by a haggard weariness, the sting of Clara's betrayal still raw. "Monsieur Poirot," he said, his voice rough, "you've got your killer. What more do you want from me?" Poirot's tone was gentle but probing. "Monsieur, your family name. It appears in Sir Reginald's notes tied to the Codex Aureus and this order of the Saffron Veil. Did he ever speak of this to you?" Langston's eyes widened, then narrowed. "My family? That's nonsense. My grandfather was a merchant, nothing more. Sir Reginald never mentioned any order, just his blasted manuscript. If he dragged my name into it, he was chasing ghosts." His words were defiant, but a flicker of unease crossed his face. Poirot nodded, his expression unreadable. "Merci, monsieur. The past, it has a way of lingering, does it not?" As they left Langston, Poirot led Hastings to the study, where the Codex Aureus remained under lock and key. Inspector Gibbs had departed, leaving the manor to its inhabitants, and Poirot requested access to Sir Reginald's papers once more. In the hidden compartment of the desk, they found another note, overlooked in the initial search, a single sheet written in Sir Reginald's hand listing 3 names, Langston, Haverford, Cresswell, followed by a cryptic phrase. "The veil guards the truth, but the truth cuts deep." Hastings' breath caught. "Poirot, these names, they're all here in this house. Was Sir Reginald implicating them?" Poirot's eyes gleamed. "Not implicating, Hastings, but connecting. The Codex's annotations, they may trace a lineage, a network of influence that Sir Reginald sought to expose. His pursuit of this truth made him enemies, but Clara's motive was personal, not tied to this order. Yet the names, they suggest a larger story. They sought out Dr. Lionel Cresswell, who was in the library with Margaret packing their belongings. Poirot's question was direct. "Monsieur le Docteur, your name appears in Sir Reginald's notes linked to the Order of the Saffron Veil. What do you know of this?" Cresswell's jaw tightened, his eyes cold. "Nothing," he said curtly. "If my name is there, it's a mistake. Sir Reginald was obsessed, seeing conspiracies where none existed. I'm a scientist, not a conspirator." Margaret beside him looked away, her hands trembling. Poirot's smile was faint. "Merci, monsieur. But the truth, it has a way of surfacing, no?" As they left the library, Hastings felt the weight of the unresolved. "Poirot, this order, it's real, isn't it? And it's tied to the Codex. Should we pursue it?" Poirot paused, his gaze distant. "The order, Hastings, it is a shadow we cannot chase today. Sir Reginald's murder is solved, and that is our task. The Codex's secrets, they belong to another story, one for historians or scholars to unravel. For now, we leave Blackthorn Manor to its healing." They returned to the terrace where Penelope Ward stood gazing at the gardens. "Monsieur Poirot," she said, her voice soft, "will the Codex ever be safe? Uncle Reginald died for it." Poirot's tone was gentle. "Mademoiselle, the Codex is a treasure, but also a burden. Keep it safe, but let its secrets rest until the time is right. Your uncle's legacy, it is in your hands now." As they prepared to depart, the manor loomed behind them, its windows reflecting the twilight. The Codex Aureus, locked away, held truths that might never be fully known. But Poirot's work was done. The shadows of legacy would linger, but for now justice had prevailed and the little gray cells could rest. Chapter 15. The Quiet Departure. The sun dipped below the horizon, casting a final glow over Blackthorn Manor's ivy-clad walls, as if bidding farewell to the turmoil that had gripped the estate. The air was cool, filled with the soft rustle of leaves and the distant call of a night bird, signaling the close of a day heavy with revelation. Hercule Poirot, his small figure as immaculate as ever, stood by the gravel drive, his valise at his feet, his mustache gleaming faintly in the twilight. Captain Arthur Hastings beside him felt a mix of satisfaction and melancholy, the resolution of Sir Reginald Haverford's murder tempered by the lingering mystery of the Codex Aureus and its cryptic secrets. "Poirot," Hastings said, his voice low as they awaited the car that would take them to the station. "You've brought justice to Blackthorn Manor, but the Codex, its talk of the Order of the Saffron Veil, still feels like an open wound. Will it ever be fully closed?" Poirot's eyes twinkled, though his expression was somber. "Mon ami, not every mystery is meant to be solved in a single chapter. The murder of Sir Reginald, it is resolved. Clara Beaumont's guilt is clear, her motives laid bare. But the Codex, with its whispers of a secret society, it belongs to a larger tapestry, one that Hercule Poirot cannot weave alone. For now we leave it to the future, to those who will follow." The manor's front door opened, and Lady Eleanor Haverford emerged, her silk shawl drawn tightly against the evening chill. Her face, though etched with grief, carried a newfound resolve, as if the truth had freed her to face the days ahead. "Monsieur Poirot," she said, her voice steady, "I cannot thank you enough. You've given us clarity, though it came at a cost. The Codex, I'll ensure it's studied properly, perhaps by a scholar who can unravel its secrets without danger." Poirot bowed slightly, his manner gracious. "Madame, you are wise to preserve it. The Codex Aureus, it is a treasure, but also a responsibility. Guard it well, and let its truths emerge in their own time." Penelope Ward joined them, her pale face softened by a quiet strength. She held her copy of the Moonstone, its edges worn from her constant touch. "Monsieur Poirot," she said, her voice trembling but firm, "Uncle Reginald would have admired your mind. I'll honor his memory by living freely as he never allowed." "Thank you." Poirot's smile was gentle. "Mademoiselle, your uncle sought truth, even if it led to his undoing. Live your truth and you honor him best." As the women returned to the manor, Dr. Lionel Cresswell and Margaret approached, their faces weary but relieved. "Monsieur Poirot," Cresswell said, his tone less guarded than before. "You've cleared my name, and for that I'm grateful. The Codex's secrets, I still think they're fantasy, but I'll leave that to others." Margaret, her hands free of her necklace for the first time, added softly, "You've given us peace, monsieur. We can move forward now." Poirot inclined his head. "The truth, madame, monsieur, it is a balm, though it stings at first. Use it well." Victor Langston, lingering by the door, offered a curt nod. "You did your job, Poirot," he said gruffly. "Clara, she fooled me, but I'll survive." His voice held a trace of bitterness, but he turned away before Poirot could respond. Father Thomas Brennan was the last to approach, his serene demeanor a contrast to the manor's turmoil. "Monsieur Poirot," he said, his cross glinting in the fading light, "you've brought light to a dark place. The soul of this house may yet find peace." Poirot's eyes met his, a silent understanding passing between them. "Mon père, the soul seeks truth, even when it pains. You, I think, know this well." As the car approached, its headlights cutting through the dusk, Poirot turned to Hastings, his voice reflective. "Mon ami, each case it is a lesson in the human heart. Sir Reginald sought truth in the Codex, but found death. Mademoiselle Beaumont sought freedom, but found chains. We, Hastings, we seek justice, and in that we find our purpose." Hastings nodded, his mind replaying the case, the blood-stained codex, the cryptic note, the ink stain, the pearl, the cigarette butt. "You saw it all, Poirot," he said. "The poison, the dagger, Clara's deception, but the order of the saffron veil, will it haunt you?" Poirot's smile was wistful. "Haunt, Hastings? No. It will intrigue, perhaps, but the little gray cells, they need rest. The Codex's secrets, they are for another day, another mind. For now we return to London, to our quiet lives." As they climbed into the car, the manor loomed behind them, its windows dark but for a single light in the library, where the Codex Aureus rested under lock and key. The car rolled down the drive, leaving Blackthorn Manor to its ghosts and its secrets, its legacy a blend of truth and shadow. Hastings leaned back, watching the countryside fade into the night. "You're a marvel, Poirot," he said. "No one else could have seen through it all." Poirot's eyes twinkled. "The little gray cells, Hastings. They see what others miss. But they are nothing without the heart, the compassion, the will to seek justice. That, mon ami, is what makes us human." As the car sped toward the station, the stars emerged above, bright and unyielding, much like the truth Poirot had uncovered. Blackthorn Manor receded into the distance, its story complete for now, but its echoes destined to linger in the minds of those who had walked its halls.